think we locked and loaded, ready to go. Let's see. Okay, there we go. It is working. I'm over here looking like, what's going on? What's going on? Why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? Y'all guys gotta bear with me a little bit because this is the first time that I'm actually doing it on my computer. So if I was a little behind the first couple of seconds, perdóname, my bad. But if this is your first time here, this is the New Era Young Lord Book Club, also known as AfroTaino Book Club. If this is your first time here, I do believe in socialism, free education, free housing, and free healthcare. So by tapping the screen, sharing this live, it's just showing me a little bit of socialist love and support to be able to get the message out to the masses. Without further ado, guys, we are going over War Against All Puerto Ricans by Nelson Dennis. We are doing part 2. We did about 3 hours yesterday, give or take. We did a couple of chapters. We're going to pick up where we left off. But before we start the live, I just want to let everybody know on TikTok, we are live on YouTube. You can find me at AfroTaino88. So if you missed parts of the segment or you want to be able to recap later on some of the book, be my guest and you always have the archive. We are going to Yabucoa, Puerto Rico for the Young Lords Back to Borinquen project. We will be in Yabucoa, Puerto Rico from October 6th to the 15th. So if anybody want to help donate, you can find the GoFundMe. Everyone on TikTok, the link is in the bio. Go check that out. But yeah, let's get right to it. I don't want to, keep you guys waiting any further. We did a couple of chapters yesterday. We want to do a couple of today, and let's see where it goes from there.
Chapter 9. Carpetas. By the 1930s, after a generation of corrupt governors and absentee landowners, Puerto Ricans started to question the motives of their northern benefactors. A 1929 article in the American Mercury stated it plainly. The American flag flies over a prosperous factory, worked by slaves who have lost their land, and may soon lose their guitars and their songs. Presto, the flag, the one and only. Puerto Rico is now a land of beggars and millionaires, of flattering statistics and distressing realities. A factory worked by peons, fought over by lawyers, bossed by absentee industrialists, and clerked by politicians. It is now Uncle Sam's second largest sweatshop. This re-examination of American largesse prompted one of the largest police reprisals in modern history. The United States sent General Blanton Winship to modernize the insular police with machine guns, grenades, tear gas, and riot gear. According to El Imparcial and other newspapers, hundreds of FBI agents armed with Thompson submachine guns had deployed to Puerto Rico and fanned out across the island. Within 1 year of its opening in 1935, the FBI National Academy began to train hundreds of high-ranking police personnel from Puerto Rico.
Listen, guys.
5 of these went on to become the island's chief of police, who until 1956 was always an officer of the U.S. Armed Forces with the rank of colonel. On the island itself, Police Chief Colonel Enrique de Orbeta created a military training program in 1936 at Fort Buchanan for all insular police personnel. This program included Tommy gun training from FBI agents. The Ponce Massacre followed on its heels. The FBI and the Intelligence Division of the Insular Police also shared information. A confidential Intelligence Division document stipulated, "The commander of the Intelligence Division shall maintain direct contact with the FBI offices in Puerto Rico.
Listen.
The Intelligence Division shall cooperate with all exchanges of information, and at all times it shall cooperate fully with FBI agents in whatever actions these agents undertake." This information was also shared with the U.S. military, The Insular Police compiled 90% of the information sent by the FBI to U.S. Army intelligence. The nature of this information was so invasive that it ultimately spawned a congressional investigation and thousands of lawsuits. The information was organized into the infamous and universally reviled Carpetas, secret police dossiers containing detailed personal data.
Listen, guys.
A network of police officers, confidential informants, and FBI agents compiled them longitudinally over years and decades. They contained a staggering amount of information on over 100,000 people. Of these, 74,412 were under political police surveillance. An additional 60,776 carpetas were opened on vehicles, boats, organizations, and geographic areas. Over 15,500 people had extensive police files for political reasons, a significant number on an island with a population roughly 4 million. An equivalent level of political surveillance in the United States would require 10.5 million files for people, organizations, and property, and over 1 million extensive files on political subversives.
Listen up.
The carpeta practice was so ubiquitous and widespread that it became a verb in Puerto Rico, as in, te arrestaron, they arrested you. Te sentenciaron, they sentenced you. And te carpetaron, they carpeted you. A political cartoon from the era captures the public sentiment. A man is getting a haircut. His barber says, I know exactly how to cut your hair. I see it right here in your carpeta. Over time, the carpetas eventually totaled 1.8 million pages. The average file contained roughly 20 pages.
And this is like, just to let you guys know, this is what made COINTELPRO so impactful, because they already had practices in it. The things that they started implemented, especially in the territories that they've inserted themselves in. These are the things like these are the things that they mastered on foreign territory to be able to control the domestic population. We got to understand these things.
More extensive. The file on Albizu Campos filled 2 boxes with 4,700 pages. The information in Carpetas included school transcripts, employment history, religious practices, political affiliations, club memberships, bank accounts, property holdings, taxes paid, family and marital records, travel history, auto registrations and license plates, meetings attended, and publications written or received.
Listen how deep it is.
They also included personal information. Friends, business partners, sexual partners, mistresses, gigolos, debtors and creditors, personal letters, intercepted at the post office, recorded phone calls, photos, waiting lists, laundry tickets, and miscellaneous items.
Everything.
With regard to nationalists, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was typically blunt. In memo after memo, he instructed his agents to uncover anything concerning their weaknesses, morals, criminal records, spouses, children, family life, educational qualifications, and personal activities other than independence activities. According to one memo, Hoover argued this would enhance our efforts to disrupt their activities and compromise their effectiveness. This disruption was not a passive or abstract affair. Hoover launched a forceful FBI campaign directed against organizations which seek independence for Puerto Rico through other than lawful means. The marching orders from Hoover were clear. The Bureau is not interested in mere harassment.
These are the same tactics they implemented on revolutionary movements during the 60s and 70s.
His agents responded aggressively. A subsequent memo to Hoover outlines an FBI program of sowing disruption and discord, causing defections from the independence movement.
Thank you for the gifts.
Exploiting factionalism. This latter memo recommends the use of handwritten anonymous letters directed to one group of nationalists and independentistas in which the seed of suspicion is planted regarding the real motivation and goal of the other group. The Carpetas were used to imprison people, get them fired or ruin their careers, terminate their educations, and permanently discredit them, even if they weren't members of the Nationalist Party.
Really quick, guys, top of the morning to everybody. We are live on YouTube at the same exact time. We're dual streaming on TikTok and YouTube, so salute to everybody on both platforms. If you want to be able to catch up with the content later on, if you happen to pop in and out, it will be up on YouTube by later on tonight. It takes a couple of hours, but the content will be uploaded within 24 hours. So if any of you guys want to hop over to YouTube and anybody on YouTube want to hop over to TikTok, you guys be able to help me out and shake up the algorithm on both platforms. So peace, blessings, positivity. Let's get back to this knowledge and education. And if I'm a little bit lower on TikTok today, guys, I'm sorry, but I got the mic connected to the computer and I'm doing a different viewpoint on YouTube. So if you guys go check it out, let me know how the audio sounds over there. I really appreciate it, buddy. Peace, blessings, positivity. Let's keep it going.
This was especially true after the passage in 1948 of Public Law 53, otherwise known as La Ley de la Mordaza,
the gag law.
The law of the muzzle, or gag law, which outlawed any mention of independence, the whistling of La Borinqueña, or ownership of a Puerto Rican flag. Even if you didn't whistle or own a flag, you could still appear on a list of known nationalists. One FBI list compiled in 1942 contained 63 people, all of whom had extensive carpetas. At the whim of the governor or FBI director, any of them could be imprisoned merely for appearing on the list. These individuals included 10 school teachers, 3 professors, a school principal, a jail warden, a tax collector, a justice of the peace, a district attorney, 4 city councilmen, the Chancellor of the University of Puerto Rico, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, a senator and law professor, the Mayor of Caguas, the Treasurer and Assistant Treasurer of Puerto Rico.
You guys are listening to the lengths that they go to be able to collect intel. Listen to the lengths that they go. Like, they probably interrogated the cats and dogs and the rats running around the neighborhood at the same exact time. They even have carpetas on them to be able to get the fucking information that they want. Tap that screen, share this live. And again, guys, I'm live on YouTube, so if you could go check out the YouTube and let me know if the audio sounds just as good over there. Today I'm fully set up, microphone and everything on YouTube, so if you guys hear me a little bit lower on TikTok today, it's because I'm transitioning over to YouTube. So salute to everybody. Tap that screen, share this live. Let's keep it going.
Coffee inspector. For several decades, Puerto Rico's first elected governor, Luis Muñoz Marín, and other members of his Popular Democratic Party used this and other FBI lists to prosecute not only nationalists, but creditors, romantic rivals, annoying journalists, and candidates from other parties. In effect, the Carpetas became instruments of political and social control. As the next 2 chapters show, a 1-page FBI report from over 70 years ago, which found Muñoz Marín to be a heavy drinker and narcotics addict, proved the power of these files.
Listen, guys.
The United States used the report to control Puerto Rican politics for nearly 25 years. Eventually, the U.S. Supreme Court declared Public Law 53 unconstitutional and struck it down in 1957. A government fund was established in 1999 to assist some of the victims of the Carpetas. In 2000, FBI Director Louis J. Free admitted in a House Appropriations Subcommittee hearing that the FBI did operate a program that did tremendous destruction to many people, to the country, and certainly to the FBI. Free then vowed to redress some of the egregious illegal action, maybe criminal action that occurred in the past. Unfortunately, by that time, the damage was incalculable. It extended beyond any individual or group, and even beyond the issue of independence. As befits a sun-kissed island with wonderfully fertile soil, Puerto Ricans had been an open, gregarious, cheerful people.
Thanks for the
But
gifts.
60 years of Carpetas and police informants had burned fear, secrecy, mistrust, dishonesty, and betrayal into their collective psyche.
100%.
The wound may never fully heal. People.
And this is the psychological warfare that I have to point out every time, especially when we discuss in history and we're going over certain historical context and the weaponizing of oneself, right? And how they use individuals against each other and how they can control the masses by using certain tactics and certain things and suppressing certain areas to be able to push everybody against each other. And that's what happens when you be able to control the population in that type of manner. You can get anybody to go against anybody to give you whatever you want and to be able to create what type of circumstance you want to create. Like I said, you're sitting there preying on individuals' most vulnerable aspect of their life, the personal shit. But let's keep it going, guys. Let's tap that screen, share this live. Again, we are live on YouTube. So if you guys could do me a favor, go hop over there, give me some love, shake up the algorithm over there. So that way we could be able to reach more people and get this content to more individuals. But salute to everybody tapping in.
Chapter 10. The Governor. 3 days after Luis Muñoz Marín first opened his eyes in 1898, the USS Maine blew up in Havana Harbor. 3 months after that, the Americans invaded Puerto Rico. 20 cannons blazed through the pre-dawn haze, and the world exploded. Walls crashed down, and women screamed as 12 warships pounded 1,300 shells into San Juan. The blasts shook the entire city, shattering windows and knocking out electrical lights. Luis was asleep, but the family cow was out to pasture in the open field of Fort San Felipe del Morro. When Luis's father, Don Luis Muñoz Rivera, ordered the Chinese servant to go out and get her, the servant refused. "You should be ashamed of yourself," said Luis's mother, Amalia. "By not daring to go, you are denying this baby his milk."
Let's tap that screen. Let's tap the
"If it's such
screen.
a big honor, why don't you do it?" said the servant. The cow was left in the field, and the family fled to Rio Piedras until the bombing died down. A few months later, after the Americans took possession of Puerto Rico, Don Luis used his newspaper, La Democracia, to criticize José Celso Barbosa, president of the Republican Party in Puerto Rico. Barbosa was friendly with the incoming Yankees, and his party advocated for eventual Puerto Rican statehood. For 2 years, strange people and whispered conversations filled Don Luis's house until 3 a.m. For 2 years, little Luis absorbed it all, until one night he ran to the balcony and yelled, "Death to Barbosa!" Barbosa was a reasonable man, but his followers were not. On September 18th, 1900, 100 Barbosa men crashed through the doors of La Democracia and attacked the printing press with machetes and hammers. With 2 friends and a few pistol shots fired into the air, Don Luis defended his newspaper. But the press, the galleys, and type fonts were all destroyed. Mustache bristling, eyes glowering, muscles knotted in his neck, Don Luis wanted to kill someone. But he had a family to protect, so they moved to the neighboring town of Caguas. Then in April 1901, Don Luis and his family boarded the USS Philadelphia and moved to New York City. Pier 9 teemed with horses, fruit salesmen, beggars, and rats. A scar-faced gentleman grabbed one of their suitcases until Don Luis beat him away.
Listen.
The smell of rotting vegetables followed them into the Battery Park trolley hut, from which they took the 9th Avenue streetcar uptown. As they rolled through a canyon of tenements, little Louise saw a bakery stuffed with provolone logs and prosciutto hams, women dressed in black, and children everywhere, leaning out the windows, running through the streets, throwing rocks at each other. Amalia held Louise tight and covered her nose. Every street was lined with garbage, horse manure, rotting vegetables, ash, broken furniture, and debris of all kinds. Don Luis took the city by storm. He looked like a fighter, drank like a sailor, and with his fierce mustache and fiery rhetoric, became a Don Juan-esque figure in the New York social scene. He leased an armory and started another newspaper, the Puerto Rico Herald. He published a book of poetry titled Tropicales and met other expatriates at the Café Martin. He found time for theater, boxing matches, and night-long arguments about art, love, and politics. He became a regular at Coster and Bial's music hall and received and honored engraved invitations to the Seven Sisters brothel on West 25th Street. The Don was a good businessman.
Listen.
Even as he roared like a lion, demanding the independence of Puerto Rico in his own newspaper, he accepted a job lobbying for Puerto Rico's largest plantation owners to convince Washington to expand their export quotas. When asked about this contradiction, he simply said, "I'm a patriot, not a communist." Through her connection with the Daughters of the American Revolution, Amalia secured Luisa's admission to the Collegiate, the oldest school in America, even older than Harvard, which had educated 4 centuries of the nation's elite, its senators, bankers, and industrialists. Students do as they're told at Collegiate, so when Luis Muñoz Marín forgot to bring his crayons to art class and was told to stand in a corner and keep quiet, he did just that. But Luis had to use the bathroom. Urine trickled down his leg and flowed in a long hot rivulet, all the way to the art teacher. Every head in the classroom turned and stared. His face grew hot as the boys started to titter, then laugh, then shout at the skinny boy with the funny accent from an island called Puerto Rico, who had just peed on the floor. All the way home that afternoon, Luis cried and cursed his schoolmates. No one had ever treated him like this in San Juan. He missed the jibaros of his island, the mountain peasants who wore straw hats, ate dried codfish, and acted funny.
Listen, guys.
He missed the flamboyant trees and the multicolored sunsets. He missed the sound of the ocean. His family had traded one island for another, and the second one was much uglier. Worst of all, Luis always felt alone. He had with him no brothers, no sisters, and no friends. His life had no roots. It was filled with chaos. There was one consolation for Luis: the city itself. He could feel it breathing and growing right under his feet. New York was dangerous, magical, shooting in every direction, even while he slept. Daimler motor cars prowled the streets. Telephones were everywhere, with hand-cranked magneto generators. Steam-powered elevators lifted him 100 feet in the air, and his apartment building was 12 stories high. His mother bought him stunning outfits: suits with knee-length trousers, patent leather boots, tailored peacoats festooned with American military symbols, eagles, stripes, anchors, stars. So to all outward appearances, Luis was a budding member of the American bourgeoisie. But his father had other plans. He rushed home from a meeting at the Café Martin one night and announced, "We're returning to Puerto Rico." They steamed back to the island, and within 2 weeks the Don had started the Union Party, committed to Puerto Rican independence. 1 month later, in November 1904, the Unionists defeated the Republicans, who favored eventual statehood for the island by a margin of 89,713 to 54,092.
Salute, top of the morning, top of the morning, top of the afternoon, I should say, right? Because we're like 30 minutes going into the afternoon. So top of the morning, top of the afternoon for some individuals. Really quick, guys, for those who are just joining us on TikTok, we are live on YouTube. So if you want to be able to catch yesterday's portion of what we went over on the book club, you'll be able to go do that. If you want to go over there and listen to the quality, what I'm hearing is the quality on YouTube right now is much better because my microphone and everything is connected to the computer. So if you guys want to hop over there and go show some love, shake up the algorithm, I really appreciate all the love and support. But let's keep it going, guys. Let's tap that screen, share this live, and let's keep it a safe and positive and productive space on YouTube and on TikTok. Let's get it.
Captured the Puerto Rican House of Delegates. With his newspapers and his new party, Don Luis was now the most powerful politician in Puerto Rico. Luis stood next to his father on the balcony of their home, overlooking the Plaza de Armas in Old San Juan. He had never seen such a crowd. Nearly everyone in San Juan was there, all crushed together on the cobblestone streets, on the plaza's dirt paths, over the grass, under the ceiba trees, past the town hall. A great mass of humanity over a quarter-mile long, all the way out to the sea. Everyone waved at the balcony, laughing, singing, yelling, "Que viva Puerto Rico!" and "Que viva Don Luis!" It wasn't an inauguration. It was a massive party, and the crowd roared for a speech. Don Luis took one step forward, and the roar shook the entire town. Someone lit a firecracker, and for a moment Luisito thought they wanted to kill him.
Let's tap the
But
screen,
when Don
guys.
Luis raised his hands and called to the sweating crowd, his voice booming through the Plaza de Armas, past the battlements of El Morro, and out over the eternal sea, the little boy realized that somehow, in this chaos of a life, his father had become a hero.
Thanks for the follow.
In 1905, when Luis began first grade in Santurce, every subject was taught in English. It didn't matter that most Puerto Ricans, including the teachers, didn't speak that language.
Thanks for the follow.
The Official Language Act of 1902 banned Spanish in public schools because it was no longer the language of Puerto Rico. And so 6-year-old Luisito, who had spent 3 years in New York City, knew more English than every student and half the teachers in the William Penn public school. His classmates hated him for it. When he skipped to the 3rd grade, they said Papi el Politico had pulled some strings for him and kept laughing behind his back. This was nothing new for Luisito. They had laughed at him in New York. They now laughed at him in Puerto Rico. He was an outsider everywhere he went, a stray leaf in the winds of his father's political career. His only friend was a place. They summered in Barranquitas, his father's hometown, where his grandfather had been the mayor. They had an old wooden house called Casa de Cielo, and a splendid garden filled with avocado, almond, and lemon trees. The town nestled into the Cordillera mountain range, where the houses formed an enormous staircase, all the way up 2 mountains, and the roofs tumbled together like blocks, with flowers and grass growing right on them, blue feathers of smoke waving from their chimneys, and occasional palm trees sticking up between. The streets wound back and forth in picturesque patterns, climbing the mountains and the neighboring hills. Every night, Luisito listened carefully to the night insects, the clamor of the coquille, the choir of crickets, the dirge of the toads, the rubbing of winged violins, the mooing of a great cow that sometimes lay in the moonlight just beneath his window, breathing and chewing her cud. He loved the lazy noises that floated up every morning, roosters crowing, pigs grunting, burros giving great racking sobs, old men playing dominoes, women singing, the wail of babies. But most of all, he loved riding a little horse called Rocinante. Every day Luisito braved the thin mountain roads and the white dusty streets of the town. He even went where streets ended, along the burro paths between straw huts, where toothless, barefoot women pounded their laundry and children stared at him with glassy eyes. Many of them were alarmingly skinny, and when they laughed, it seemed that their skin would crack open and expose their bones. Luis stopped to hear the jibaros tell their stories. They told him the secrets of the mountain, the trees, mysterious ghosts and fairies, and a mail carrier named Salto Padilla, who fell down a waterfall. Luis felt at home among the jibaros and their natural world. He spoke to the trees, and they answered him. He carried a little notebook, and one day he wrote, "I understand, and I smile. I sing what you would sing if you were a poet. I know it, because if I were a tree, my branches would send out shoots like yours." One Sunday, his father arrived from San Juan with a picnic on his back. They walked down the San Cristobal Valley and into the deep woods near the Rio Hondo. Far away, Luisito heard the murmuring river and hundreds of little sounds, birds, lizards, the rustling of leaves, sounds full of mystery that he'd never heard. Then it started raining, and instead of running for shelter or back up the mountain, his father laughed and unpacked the picnic. "This is how you live," he said, handing Luisito a slice of ham. The tropical downpour came hard, hitting the leaves like bullets, and drenched Luis, his father, the food, and the valley. Don Luis made jokes, and they laughed, and only the trees heard them. They were all alone in the world. Luis didn't have to share his father with anyone. The picnic was a rare moment, the finest day in his young life. After that day in the rain, Don Luis disappeared back into politics. He spent no time with Luisito or Amalia. The picnic was over, buried in the forest of the San Cristobal Valley. Feeling lost and with no one to anchor him, Luisito became a horrible student. He failed all his third-grade tests, and a private tutor, Pedro Moxo, wrote, "Luis is bright but very undisciplined." Luis spent his time reading The Three Musketeers and Robinson Crusoe, and daydreaming about becoming a war correspondent or a composer of romantic ballads. In 1910, Don Luis was elected as Puerto Rico's resident commissioner in Washington, D.C., the island's only, albeit non-voting, member of Congress. The marriage between Luis's parents had deteriorated, so Don Luis moved to Washington, and Luis moved with his mother to a small apartment in New York, at 141st Street and Broadway. The boy's disorganized education continued, with a short stint in a public school, then another private tutor. In 1911, Don Luis put his foot down and brought Luisito to Washington. He enrolled the boy in the exclusive Georgetown Prep School, the oldest Jesuit school in the nation, known for building character, demanding precision, and above all, instilling discipline in every student. It didn't work on Luis. He flunked every class except modern literature, and had to repeat the entire 10th grade. When his father returned to Puerto Rico to campaign for re-election in 1914, Luis dropped out of school and joined his mother in New York. He spent a year swimming in Coney Island, dancing in the Happy Hills Casino on 145th Street, and sneaking into Nigger Mike's Cafe in Chinatown, where Blind Tom played the piano, and Irving Berlin, the singing waiter, made cameo appearances. One night he followed Blind Tom to a Hell's Kitchen opium den run by two crooks named Harry Hamburger and Sammy Goldstein, and financed by a bank robber named Jim McNally. The house had heavy curtains, embroidered cushions, and deep bunks for the opium smokers, as well as many side rooms for VIP customers. Luis saw a lot of showgirls and businessmen, and listened to Blind Tom play the house piano. Luis was fascinated by the showgirls smoking opium behind the closed doors. The multicolored opium lamps charmed him. He even loved the fragrance of the opium itself, its scent of crushed almonds. The party ended in 1915, when Don Luis won re-election and recalled his son to Washington. He forced Luis to take the high school equivalency exams and enrolled him in a Georgetown Law School night program. True to form, Luis passed only one course. A Georgetown classmate said, "Luis always behaved like a poet. In a restaurant, he would stop eating and stare into space. Sometimes he would get so absent-minded that he'd scratch his nose with his fork." Years later, a roommate said that Luis's opium smoking caused him to itch and scratch incessantly, especially the tip of his nose. Luis went to the library until 4 a.m., and his father would wait for him. Many nights, sitting in an old leather chair, he advised Luis to take life more seriously. Don Luis tried to help by hiring him as his personal secretary in Washington. Luis typed and translated letters, helped Don Luis write and practice his speeches, and even corrected his pronunciation. On several occasions, Luis sat proudly in the gallery of the U.S. Congress and heard his father's voice fill the chamber with words written by his son. On November 3rd, 1916, Don Luis left for Puerto Rico to discuss the terms of the Jones Act, which would soon give U.S. citizenship to all Puerto Ricans.
Listen up.
2 days later, a family friend, Eduardo Giorgetti, called Luis and his mother. They needed to rush to Puerto Rico right away. Don Luis's gallbladder had burst, and the infection had spread throughout his body. Giorgetti paid for expensive treatments, but nothing could be done. Don Luis, only 57 years old, was dying. He had one last wish, that Luis should become a lawyer. "The most important thing in life is your name," he said. "I'm leaving you a good one.
Thank you for the
Now
gifts.
it's your turn. Please become El Licenciado Luis Muñoz Marín. You'll never regret it." On November 15th, 1916, church bells tolled for the dead. A funeral procession passed through Barceloneta, Santurce, and finally Barranquitas, the town where Don Luis had been born. Hundreds of Unionists, all bearing flags and singing the party's battle song, rode on horseback before the funeral carriage. 200 automobiles followed. Jibaros poured in from every town, from every road, from every mountain to pay their respects. When the procession reached Barranquitas, young girls stood on both sides of the main street, dressed in white with black ribbons around their waists, holding flower bouquets. A chorus of Catholic priests began a solemn chant, pierced by the anguished cries of women and children. The band played La Borinqueña, the island's national anthem. Then they buried Don Luis. When Don Luis was alive, his son's life had been chaotic. When he died, it became even more so. A bottomless rake's progress. Luis had spent 10 of his first 18 years on the U.S. mainland. He had no brothers or sisters, no sense of home, and no sense of himself or what to do with his life. So he started to throw it away. He broke down and cried when Eduardo Giorgetti opened his father's briefcase. Inside he found meticulously packed items: razors, combs, black ties, a used collar, false cuffs, cufflinks, and a checkbook with a balance of $600. Don Luis had died poor, leaving his family in debt. Even his newspaper, La Democracia, was in arrears. Luckily, Giorgetti owned the second largest pineapple plantation in all of Puerto Rico. He bought a house for the widow Doña Amalia
Listen,
and
guys.
relocated the offices of La Democracia to the residence, ensuring a small but steady income for Amalia and Luis. A few days after the burial, Luis published a grand poem in the literary magazine Juan Bobo. "I would like to be a giant, to embrace the mountains that he contemplated in his boyhood, the mountains for which he struggled from his youth onward, the mountains that sheltered his countrymen, the Jibaros, and that today entomb his body. I would like to be a giant, to hold close to my chest all these Puerto Ricans who keep forever in their noble hearts the sacred memory of my father. And I would like to be a giant, to complete the work of Luis Muñoz Rivera, the giant of Borinquen." 2 weeks later, the giant sailed back to New York with his mother. He didn't struggle for the mountains, the Jibaros, or anyone else. He ignored his father's last wish, sold his law books, and refused to return to Georgetown Law School. Instead, he decided to become a surrealistic poet. The rake's progress had begun. Over the next 15 years, Luis started and abandoned 3 literary magazines: Revista de Indias, Spartacus, and Quasimodo, and wrote occasional news articles for H.L. Mencken. He used the printing facilities of La Democracia to self-publish a book of short stories called Borrones, Ink Blots. He wrote a play about a morphine addict named Julio Herrera y Resig that ran for one night and sold only 1 ticket. He married a writer named Muna Lee, had 2 children, and abandoned them repeatedly. He shuttled constantly between the United States and Puerto Rico and changed apartments 12 times, living in Manhattan and Staten Island, Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia, West Englewood, New Jersey, and San Juan, Ponce, Santurce, Barranquitas, and Guayama. Half the time he left his wife and children behind. For years he did not contribute to their support. Muna had to work from the moment she married him. One time he told her, "I'm going out to buy cigarettes, be back in a few minutes," and did not return for 3 months. Luis was especially drawn to Greenwich Village. He heard about Edgar Allan Poe starving and smoking opium in the attic of 84 West 3rd Street while writing The Raven. He walked past Madame Blanchard's House of Genius at 61 Washington Square South, where the careers of Eugene O'Neill, Stephen Crane, Willa Cather, Theodore Dreiser, O. Henry, H.L. Mencken, and Walter Lippmann had blossomed. Luis had heard Blanchard's complaint that art is grand and literature is wonderful, but it takes so many barrels of liquor to produce them. This is not a house, it's an aquarium. In fact, the village was full of drunks. Published drunks, dancing drunks, singing drunks, crying drunks, lying drunks, lurching drunks, running drunks, fighting drunks, important drunks, sneaky drunks, amorous drunks, mischievous drunks, sleepy drunks, and a drunk who flapped his wings and called like a seagull. It was the Latin Quarter, the left bank of New York, where free love, socialism, Freudianism, imagist poetry, flappers, fops, and fads ran wild on every street. It was a hotbed of nonconformity, where young people in dingy apartments hatched lofty plots to outwit a sordid world. Luis couldn't get enough of it. For him, it was the bohemian life he'd imagined while reading Robinson Crusoe and the Three Musketeers. He loved the endless parade of poets, painters, prostitutes, pimps, gigolos, gangsters, financiers, frauds, hobos, heiresses, boxers, bank robbers, and the occasional Irish priest. He loved the attics, studios, bars, clubs, and restaurants. He loved the Fourth Ward Hotel, with trap doors that dropped drunks and dead people directly into the East River. He loved the hellhole, where Eugene O'Neill drank with gangsters, and the garbage disposal was a pig in the cellar. He loved Club A, the Brevoort, the Cripples' Home, the Dump on the Bowery, Harp House, and Romany Marie, the Moravian fortune-teller from Delancey Street. Luis visited all of them, and his attire, spats, a cape, and a Montana peak hat, added to the mystique of the revolutionary poet from Puerto Rico. After Luis's first child was born in 1920, his mother's allowance no longer covered his expenses, so he developed the Greenwich Village Safari for out-of-town explorers. The tour was a surrealistic masterpiece, Luis Muñoz Marin's greatest work of art. Years later, as governor of Puerto Rico, he would brag about it in La Fortaleza and offer it as further proof of American stupidity.
Listen.
He conducted the tour every Saturday, starting with the Washington Square Arch, the House of Genius, the Provincetown Theater, and the Edgar Allan Poe garret on 3rd Street. Then, if the safari members were rich, he herded them into the Brevoort Cafe at 23 Fifth Avenue for an aperitif and caviar lunch. If they weren't, they visited a tea room on 6th Avenue. For a dab of culture, they poked into 5th Avenue and 10th Street, where a lawyer named Charles L. Student threw a release party for whatever book had been published that week. Hundreds of hungry villagers, including Luis, jammed into 4 rooms for the free food and drinks and gossip. After the student party, the real safari began. Luis led the group past the saloons, greasy spoons, flop houses, shop houses, smoke shops, rag vendors, barber colleges, bookie joints, and democratic clubs that bordered the village and the Bowery. They visited the Palace of Illusions to see Jojo the dog-faced boy, Lalu the East Indian enigma, who had a small head growing out of his side, and Lady Mephistopheles in a corset red tights, horns and tail. Every few minutes, Lady M would chase the male patrons around with a bullwhip and lash them savagely when she caught them. Next came Guido Bruno's garret at 58 Washington Square South. A village charlatan who created a layman's dream of the artist's life and crammed it into his loft. Bruno hired pretty girls and hot-eyed young men who declared themselves poets, writers, and painters, and behaved like artistic freaks the moment anyone arrived. When Luis and his safari walked in, they saw poets reciting their poems, painters sketching nude models, and young people fighting, kissing, or crying in the bathrooms. "I fried eggs with Walt Whitman," Guido would say, then demand a 25-cent donation to Bruno's First Aid for Struggling Artists. He also sold a dozen literary magazines, such as Bruno's Bohemia, Bruno's Chatbook, and Bruno's Weekly. Next on the safari, just a few doors down from Guido's, came Romany Marie's tea room. Romany was a gypsy fortune-teller who dressed like a wild woman and told everyone that her father had raped her mother in a great forest in Moldavia. Actually, Romany Marie was born on Delancey Street, where her father owned a kosher pickle shop. But her cold reed fortunes were uncannily accurate, and she split her fees with Luis, so he always stopped in. The high point of the entire night happened on the border of Chinatown. Luis led everyone to Mott and Bleecker Streets, through a dimly lit building, up some creaky stairs, and into a barely furnished tenement where a white woman named Lulu and a Chinese man named Georgie Yi ran an opium den. Luis would introduce Lulu as a great New England poet, the next Emily Dickinson. Yi would bow formally, take a long pull on his bamboo pipe, twitch for a minute, then hop around the kitchen yodeling "Tea for Texas" like Jimmy Rogers. At that point, Lulu would burst into tears and Yi would grab a knife. Then Luis would announce that Yi had become crazed from the opium and escort his people off the premises. After this spectacle, Luis would simply walk the group back to the Washington Square Arch and say goodbye. The safari members would all look at each other, hug Luis, and jam a walloping tip into his hands for the most exciting day of their lives. After it was all over, Luis would head back to Chinatown. He'd pay Lulu and Georgie Yi, take a hit off Yi's opium pipe, and go home to the wife and kids. Sometimes he'd stay at Georgie Yi's, spend all the money, and go home broke. In 1923, Luis left his wife and children, aged 2 and 3, behind, and headed for Puerto Rico to assemble his father's writings into a book titled Political Campaigns. He solicited $5,000 donations from his father's friends, spent all the money, and never published the collection. The party lasted for 2 years while Muna raised the children by herself in New York. After that, Papa was a rolling stone. He rolled to New York in 1925, to Puerto Rico later that year, to New York in 1926, to Puerto Rico later that year, and back to New York in 1927. This last time, he left Muna and the children behind in Puerto Rico. He spent the next 4 years without them in Greenwich Village. He spent a lot of time at Georgie Yi's and repeatedly asked his wife and mother for money. After Luis burned through $600 in 2 months, the equivalent of over $8,300 in 2014 dollars, his mother wrote, "It is time for you to have a normal life."
Thanks for the gifts.
His wife added, "I can't help you in any financial way, but I shall be utterly lost and undone if you cannot manage to help us immediately."
Really quick, guys, for those who are just now joining, we're also live on YouTube. It is the same name and account as my name here on TikTok, AfroTaino88. So if you guys miss or want to catch up with some of the content or books that we have gone over, starting as of yesterday, we're starting to dual stream, so you guys can always go back. And if you guys want to switch over and show me some love and be able to shake the algorithm onto YouTube, you know, I really appreciate all the love and support. Like I said, I'm trying to transition over to YouTube, so that way we can have an archive of all of the books that we do and all the content we do. So if you guys could do me a favor, show me a little bit of socialist love and support, hop over to YouTube, kind of tap that screen, jump in the comments, and the audio quality is a lot better on YouTube because I got the microphone connected to YouTube and my computer versus I'm just talking to you guys without nothing right now. So salute to everybody on TikTok, salute to everybody on YouTube. Let's keep it going. Let's keep pushing this book, guys. Knowledge and education is power.
But Louise sent no money. Muna was on her own. For a few weeks, he became a Washington lobbyist to get Congress to lower the tariffs on Argentinian grapes. The effort failed, and most of his meager income came from the Greenwich Village safari, which he now ran several times per week. The business picked up when Luis met a village character named Joe Gould, who added a real flair to the safari. Before the tour began, Gould would lecture everyone about spaghetti, false teeth, insanity, the jury system.
Really quick, for everyone who follows me on YouTube, I follow back. So if you got good content and too, I'll come across it. We can go, we can trade content for content. But tap that screen, share this live. Again, we are live on YouTube and we're live on TikTok. We're trying to transition right now, guys. So tap that screen, share this live. And again, all gifts and donations on both platforms will be going to the Young Lords Back to Borinquen Project. We will be in Yabucoa, Puerto Rico from October 6th to October 15th at the Marcos Sanchez Community Center. So if you guys want to help, volunteer, donate, hit me up in the inbox. If you want to donate, you can also hit the GoFundMe link in the bio, or all gifts and donations will be going to that program. So salute to everybody showing mad love and support. Let's keep it going, guys. And everybody on YouTube, let me know that quality is a lot better, right?
Lesbians, remorse, the size of Mandan Indian heads, and the emasculating effect of the typewriter on modern literature.
Thank you.
Then he would sing an old Salvation Army song. There are flies on me, there are flies on you, but there are no flies on Jesus. During the safari, Gould would punch authors at Charles Student's literary parties and tell Romany Marie, "You're no fortune teller. You're an old Jewish fraud." In Georgie Yee's opium den, he complained about the prices and yelled, "I get better chandu at Jimmy Foo's laundromat." The tips nearly doubled with Joe Gould as a safari guide. But in December 1928,
Thank you.
Gould
Appreciate
ended the
that.
partnership because he felt that Luis was too irresponsible. Things were getting tight for Luis. He was spending more and more time at Georgie Yee's, averaging 5 pipes per visit, and he wasn't writing the way he'd planned. Rather than poetry or plays, he turned out mercenary little articles at $25 a month for the American Mercury and Smart Set. Luckily, a fellow named Robert Claremont arrived in Greenwich Village. Claremont stormed into New York as the millionaire playboy and a perpetual party source. His apartment at 143 West 4th Street became the grand central terminal of the village, as poets wrote on tables, artists drew on the walls, some guests recited, others discoursed on philosophy, most drank bootleg liquor, and everyone theorized about or practiced love. His parties lasted 3 days and usually ended with busted lamps, burned tables, and soiled chairs. After a few months, Claremont grew tired of it all and started eating incognito at Hubert's cafeteria. Luis ate there too before going to Georgie Yee's. He'd heard about Claremont and devised an investment scheme. Luis and Claremont were going to open the hottest nightclub in Puerto Rico. With Claremont's money and notoriety, Luis's knowledge of the island, and constant promotion in La Democracia, the idea could not fail. The combination of gambling, beaches, Caribbean rum, music, and showgirls would turn San Juan into the tourism capital of America. For several months, Luis drew up plans and made inquiries into San Juan real estate. He negotiated with music composer Rafael Hernandez and the trio Borinquen Band. He even had La Democracia dummy up a fake front page with a story headlined, "Casino Claremont el nuevo espectáculo." Casino Claremont, the new spectacle. The moment Claremont saw the newspaper, he handed Luis $5,000 to continue developing the project. Unfortunately, 2 weeks later, on October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday rocked Wall Street and wiped Claremont out. The playboy gave himself one last party, dropped out of sight, and never asked Luis for the $5,000. Luis sent $500 to his wife, but he didn't return to the island. He wrote to Muna about another literary magazine he was starting with the balance of Claremont's money. Muna wrote back, "Please stop lying to yourself. Your children need you." His wife was right, but Luis kept lounging at Georgie Yee's. Yee was a kindly old man and genial host who offered oolong tea and crackers to his clients. Luis enjoyed the camaraderie and humor of the place, and the all-night mahjong games in a separate noisy room. After a few months, Luis just went for the opium. He would lie down on a bunk and rest his head on a blue porcelain pillow. Yee would warm and soften a pill of chandu. He served the highest quality fukiwen, and prepare the bamboo pipe. Then Luis would lean over a coconut oil opium lamp with silver dragons painted on the side and inhale slowly. As the chandu bubbled and dissolved, a luscious magic would fill his lungs. The first few times Luis became thirsty, dizzy, and a little nauseous, but he slowly learned to enjoy opium's effects. Within a few months, Luis had spent all his money at Georgie Yee's. The old man extended him credit for as long as he could, then in September 1931, finally gave him a jar full of seeds and explained how to plant a poppy field, harvest the opium sap, and distill it into chandu. They parted as friends, and Luis visited him over the coming years. But for the moment, Luis was broke, with nowhere to go except back to Puerto Rico. By 1931, Puerto Rico bore a strong American footprint. All of the island's sugar farms belonged to 41 syndicates. The banks owned 60% of the sugar plantations, 80% of the tobacco farms, and 100% of the coastal railroads, shipping facilities, and maritime vessels. AFL-CIO President Samuel Gompers reported, "I have never seen so many human beings showing so clearly the signs of malnutrition, nor such an accumulation of misery in one people." Adding to the misery, Hurricane San Felipe blasted the island in 1928 with 160-mile-per-hour winds, killing over 300 people, causing $50 million in agricultural losses, and leaving thousands homeless. As if blown by this hurricane, a wave of jibaros descended from the hills begging for jobs, starving in the streets, and settling in the San Juan slums of La Perla and El Fanguito. In the evenings, fathers and children walked the streets calling, "Leftovers for our pigs." But everyone knew the scraps were for their families to eat that night. This was the island to which Luis returned. He sent for Muna and the children, and they all moved into his mother's house, a 2-story Spanish colonial on a quiet cobblestone street in Old San Juan. Luis planted his poppy seeds in the quarter-acre patio and garden, and harvested them in January. With $23 a week from La Democracia, and the authority to publish whatever he wanted, Luis settled into his role. His children were 10 and 11, and he'd spent only 3 years with them, so this was a great family opportunity. But Luis quickly grew bored, and a different idea took hold. He saw the reverence across Puerto Rico for his father as one of the leading crusaders for the island's independence. He saw the starving jibaros, the poverty in the streets, and the growing resentment against the United States.
His father was the first elected governor for Puerto Rico, elected by the Puerto Ricans right before the United States invaded in 1898. In 1897, I think, I don't think Spain allowed Puerto Rico to do their own votes, to be able to have more autonomy, to have more freedom just under the Spanish crown. or the Spanish rule, or whatever you want to call it. It's because they were on the verge of losing all their territories and all their investments. So it's not like they did it out of the kindness of their heart, but it's also understanding the geopolitical issues that were going on at that time. So to be able to give Cuba and Puerto Rico more sovereignty for them was beneficial versus losing them altogether. And again, I'm not pro Spain, I'm not pro US, I'm just giving you the dynamics of what was going on at the time. Cuba resisted and rejected Spain's offer. Puerto Rico accepted it. They ran their elections. They were able to, bring people in, and a couple of weeks, I forgot exactly how long, but it was very, very short period of time in between. I think maybe like a week or so when they actually took office to when the actual United States invaded Puerto Rico. So you can kind of see like they've never, the one time they was actually able to elect their own government, their own politician, their own governor and all of that before the United States invaded was literally like a week or two before they invaded. So when they give you that misnomer that the United States went in there to be a protectorate and to help Puerto Rico and to give it, bro, Puerto Rico was already breaking away from Spain, whether we agree with it or not, or whether y'all want to see it or not, or however it was going because of the geopolitical issues that were happening. Cuba was kicking their ass. You guys came and took and co-opted the name, to put it as the Spanish-American War, when in reality it was the Cuban-Spanish War. Cuba was kicking their ass. Puerto Rico was held on a little bit more lockdown, than Cuba was at that time. And if you understand who was governing Puerto Rico at the time prior to and where they came from and the military strategic strategy they used to be able to suppress the Puerto Ricans at that time. So it's a lot that has to do with it. But let's kick in right into the next chapter. And again, guys, we're live on YouTube. So if you guys want to hop on YouTube, show me some love, shake the algorithm up. I appreciate all the love and support. Peace, blessings, and positivity to everybody. Let's keep it going.
He studied the life of William Randolph Hearst, who used his newspapers to run for office and spark a war. He realized that, like Hearst, he had a platform on the little island of Puerto Rico. Luis decided to run for the Puerto Rican Senate. The headline writers of the Puerto Rican press had a field day. The son of Muñoz Rivera, the failed poet, dilettante, high school dropout, bohemian wise guy, bon vivant, erstwhile socialist, heavy drinker, prodigal son, deadbeat dad, and miserable husband, had hijacked his daddy's newspaper to tell the island how to live and what to do.
Listen.
And if that wasn't enough, he wanted to be a senator too. Luis retaliated, calling Puerto Rico a land of beggars and millionaires, and a factory bossed by absent industrialists and clerked by politicians. At the Liberal Party convention on March 12, 1932, when a rumor circulated that Luis was a morphine addict, he mounted the stage and looked directly into the audience. "Throughout the island," he said, "someone has waged a campaign of defamation against me. They are claiming that I take morphine. I don't know who those persons are, but the poison has been spilled. Therefore, I now accuse these persons of being ruffians, cowards, and dogs. They are probably here right now in this assembly. Look at them. You know who they are, even if I don't. I am going to stop now so that if they dare, the ruffians will show their faces. Let the first ruffian rise and walk up to this podium." The hall went dead silent. The delegates all looked around to see who would move. No one stirred. One man coughed. A few weeks later, Luis was elected to the Senate. To Luis's delight, the Puerto Rican Senate was very similar to Georgie Yee's opium den. Conmen, gamblers, and thieves paraded through every day, with new and ingenious schemes to raid the island treasury. Lobbyists and lawyers rushed in and out. Roads were built at triple the actual cost. Water companies received exclusive franchises. Week after week, the senators got up and said nothing. Nobody listened, then everybody disagreed. 19 dogs barking idiotically through an endless night. Luis adjusted easily to this farce. He declaimed about Wall Street vampires on the Senate floor, denounced Yankee sugar barons in committee, and demanded independence for Puerto Rico and La Democracia. Then he went home, spent time with his family, tended his opium plants, and smoked a few weekend pipes. He even wrote some verses in the style of the French symbolist poets. In 1940, Luis devised a plan. He created the Popular Democratic Party and campaigned feverishly through the Cordillera Mountains and their surrounding small towns. He organized committees in all 786 rural barrios throughout the island and pursued the Jibaro vote, sometimes riding a donkey, sometimes wearing a straw hat. He came up with a catchy new slogan that updated the French revolutionary motto of Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, liberty, equality, fraternity, to Pan, Tierra, Libertad, bread, land, liberty. He convinced the Jibaros that he would fill their bellies, bread, restore all farms stolen by the United States, land, and secure the independence of Puerto Rico, liberty. The promises did the trick. After the November 1940 elections, as president of the Puerto Rican Senate, president of the Popular Democratic Party, and publisher of La Democracia, Luis was the most powerful politician in Puerto Rico. He had stirred people's hopes and dreams all over the island. Cries of Pan Tierra Libertad and Puerto Rico Libre resounded in every town, and Luis shouted the words loudly and often. Then a strange thing happened. A U.S. senator named Millard Tydings finally introduced a bill that would give Puerto Ricans their independence. Every politician on the island supported it, except Luis. Throughout the 1940s, he repeatedly opposed the Tydings Independence Bill. He even traveled to Washington in 1943 and 1945 to lobby against it, saying that Puerto Rico was not ready for self-government. This flip-flop troubled Puerto Ricans. Some said that Luis had developed a split personality, a clinical amnesia with regard to the central issue in Puerto Rican politics. His own father had fought for this cause throughout his entire life. How could he now turn around and oppose it? It would take almost 60 years to solve this mystery. The solution was quite tragic. The U.S. government had in its hands a one-page document that gave them complete and absolute control over Luis Muñoz Marín. Chapter 11. How to Rule a Country with a One-Page Report. Luis Muñoz Marín was vulnerable.
Really quick, guys, I gotta go run out there really quick. I gotta grab my sandwich because I'm pretty hungry. But let's keep tapping that screen. Let's keep sharing this live. Let's keep showing that love and support to one another. And if you guys could do me a favor, we're live on YouTube, same name, AfroTaino. If you guys can go over there and show me some love and support and be able to shake up the algorithm over there, I really appreciate it, guys. Again, I'm trying to transfer over to YouTube so that way the content can be archived and you guys can always have access to it, whether it's me just yapping my gums, talking my ish or whatever, or it's just actually receiving the book. So I appreciate all the love and support. Like I said, I do believe in socialism, free education, free housing, and free healthcare. So by tapping the screen, sharing this live, it's just showing me a little bit of socialist love and support to be able to get the message out to the masses. And don't forget, we are going back to Yabucoa, Puerto Rico, October 6th at the Marco Sanchez Community Center for the Young Lords Back the Puerto Rican Project. So if you guys want to help and support, the GoFundMe link is in the bio on my TikTok, or all gifts and donations will be going to the Young Lords Back the Puerto Rican Project. So I hope to see you guys there. I hope to see all the support. But let's keep tapping that screen, keep sharing this live. And if you guys, like I said, if you guys could switch over to YouTube, go subscribe. The audio's a lot better over there. And I need some love, guys. Keep tapping it up. Let's keep it going.
Weakness. The FBI found it, filed it, and fastened it around his neck. Muñoz Marín was a narcotics addict. Multiple informants had reported the information, appearing at the end of the synopsis of facts in the document. Though dated April 1st, 1943, and written by a ridiculously named Nixon Butt, This report was no joke. It served as a leash on the first democratically elected governor of Puerto Rico. Why did the FBI seek out this information? A series of related events suggest an answer. Attempts had been made on the lives of two U.S.-appointed governors, Robert Gore and Blanton Winship. Police Chief E. Francis Riggs had been assassinated. The Insular Police had shot and killed 4 members of the Nationalist Party. An agricultural strike had paralyzed the island in 1934, and the Ponce Massacre had resulted in the deaths of 19 people in 1937. A citizens' committee had warned President Franklin Roosevelt that a state of actual anarchy existed in Puerto Rico, and the towns were in a state of siege. By the late 1930s, the colonial arrangement was deteriorating. The United States had to control this situation, or risk losing the island forever. The king of the Carpetas, J. Edgar Hoover, rode in with his FBI cavalry. Barely 3 weeks after Luis Muñoz Marin's election as president of the Puerto Rican Senate in November 1940, Hoover commanded the San Juan FBI office to obtain all information of a pertinent character concerning Luis Muñoz Marín and his associates. He later issued a second demand for a thorough and discreet investigation by the San Juan office. The reports poured in immediately. Luis has no profession. He is absolutely irresponsible financially. He never has any money in his pockets and never thinks of his responsibilities. He never accepted the responsibility of marriage or of his family, and for years has not contributed to the support of Muna Lee, his wife, or his children. In 1934, he abandoned his home and had since been living with his mistress, Inez Maria Mendoza. Ruby Black, a prominent Washington journalist, was his illegitimate half-sister. Her mother had been the Washington, D.C. mistress of his father. In addition to being a deadbeat philanderer with a bastard half-breed sister, Muñoz Marín was utterly unprincipled, had no ideals whatsoever, and had been a member of 4 different political parties during his political career. Worse yet, he was the communist leader for Puerto Rico and the entire Caribbean Sea area, and the ranking official of the Communist Party in the West Indies, and had appointed 5 professors to the University of Puerto Rico, all of whom were self-admitted communists. The information kept coming. The day after his father died, 24 years before the FBI report, Muñoz Marín had been seen in public in a drunken condition. For several days after, he was seen quite intoxicated in public places, and became the talk of San Juan. 2.5 decades later, Senator Muñoz Marín, president of the Puerto Rican Senate, was a heavy drinker who goes on protracted drunks which last from 2 or 3 days to 2 or 3 weeks, and whose bill for whiskey alone runs around $2,000 a year. On one occasion, he got thoroughly drunk with Vicente Geigel Polanco, the majority leader of the Senate, in the Normandy Hotel. On another, he arrived at El Escambron Beach Club at 8 p.m., ordered drinks, and then more drinks, then swore at his friends, and finally left at 1 a.m., so intoxicated that he was hardly able to walk. When El Escambron told him that he owed $650, he offered the club a $650 tax deduction. He also had 5-year-old outstanding bills for $300 at the Condado Hotel and $200 from RCA. Hoover was an old hand at character assassination. He knew these antics were small potatoes. He needed something big and demanded that his overworked agents find it for nearly 3 years, until they ran out of material and started sending him legislative summaries and press clippings. Then they struck gold. On April 1st, 1943, Hoover received multiple reports from reliable informants that Luis Muñoz Marín was a narcotics addict. In addition, a supplemental report showed that he was known as El Moto de Isla Verde, the junkie of Isla Verde, and that he'd been involved in an important narcotics case, but nothing was done inasmuch as Muñoz Marín would fire all members of the Insular Government Narcotics Bureau if prosecution were even contemplated.
Yo, listen to this.
According to this report, the Customs Service, U.S. Treasury Department, San Juan, Puerto Rico, had been informed of the existence of Muñoz Marín's participation in the narcotics case.
Salute to everybody.
Days after gathering this
I
information.
thought I paused it. My bad, guys. Salute to everybody tapping in. We are live on YouTube, guys. So if you guys want to hop over there, show me some love. Each live will be archived, so you guys can always go back and check the live you guys missed. Yesterday's live, part 1 of this part 2 series right now is up on YouTube. We'll probably get like maybe 3 or 4 parts because I think there's about 5 hours, so probably have about three parts of the War Against All Puerto Ricans by Nelson Dennis. But if you guys could hop over to YouTube, the quality of sound is a little bit better and the camera view is a little bit different. But just to help me shake up the algorithm, do me a favor, hop over to YouTube. It's AfroTaino88, the same exact way as here on TikTok. And salute to everybody participating. We got 14 minutes left of this chapter. Let's get it.
The FBI closed the case. Muñoz Marín's FBI file ended abruptly with the notation that all background investigation has been completed in this case. This case is being placed in a closed status. Hoover finally had some real dirt, and now had Muñoz Marín exactly where he wanted him. Muñoz Marín was an addict. He'd gotten caught in a narcotics deal, and he'd used his public office to bury the entire matter. The FBI had no desire to investigate further or to prosecute Muñoz Marín's narcotics case.
Not at all.
Because with this report and all it implied, addiction, drug sales, obstruction of justice, the FBI could end his career at any time.
Or control his career. However you want to look at it. What's more beneficial? To control him or destroy him?
As the following sequence of events makes clear, this one-page report turned the political leader of Puerto Rico into a U.S. sock puppet. Through FBI back channels, Muñoz Marín was made aware of this report, which was filed on April 1st, 1943. The very next day, April 2nd, Senator Millard Tydings, Democrat of Maryland, chairman of the Senate Committee on Territories and Insular Affairs, introduced a bill in the U.S. Congress that opened the door for Puerto Rican independence. It was modeled after the Tydings-McDuffie Bill of 1934, which had set the Philippines on the road to independence. The senator even sent a telegram to Muñoz Marín to enlist his support. To the shock and disbelief of the Puerto Rican people, Muñoz Marín opposed the independence bill. The El Imparcial headline blared, "Mr. Tydings will support independence if Puerto Rico desires it. Mr. Tydings patrocinará Proyecto Independencia si Puerto Rico lo quiere."
La Fortaleza.
A version of the Tydings Bill had been introduced in 1936 under entirely different circumstances. Senator Tydings had been a close personal friend of E. Francis Riggs and encouraged him to accept the post of police chief of Puerto Rico. On April 26, 1936, anguished by Riggs's assassination, he introduced an independence bill for Puerto Rico. Under the terms of the 1936 bill, if Puerto Ricans voted yes in a referendum to be held in November 1937, the United States would grant the island independence after a 4-year transitional period. During each of those 4 years, the tariffs on Puerto Rican commodities and products would increase by 25%. In the 4th year, when the tariff level on Puerto Rican goods had reached 100%, the same as that paid by any other country, Puerto Rico would become independent. Muñoz Marín and many others objected to the 4-year provision. The Philippines had been given 20 years to phase in the tariffs. Committees were formed, editorials were written, and in the end, Tydings simply withdrew his bill. In 1943, Tidings submitted a new independence bill, and Muñoz Marín opposed it again. 4 factors distinguished the 1936 and 1943 Tidings bills. 1. The 1943 bill contained a 20-year tariff phase-in structure, just like the Tidings-McDuffie Act for the Philippines. 2. In 1940, Muñoz Marin's campaign slogan had been Pan, Tierra, Libertad, bread, land, liberty. The liberty component of the platform referred to Puerto Rican independence. He delivered it in person to hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans in 786 electoral districts between the months of August 1939 and November 1940. 3. On May 20th, 1936, Muñoz Marín published in his own newspaper, La Democracia, that he would continue to fight for independence. 4. In support of this fight, he created the El Bate newsletter, which advocated for liberty and was read widely, with 6 million copies in distribution. With the 1943 Tidings bill containing exactly the provisions he had demanded, a 20-year tariff transition, and his 7-year history of clamoring for Puerto Rican independence, from 1936 to 1943, Muñoz Marín had no conceivable basis for opposing the second Tidings bill. Yet he did so fiercely, even traveling to Washington, D.C., to testify in opposition to the bill before a Senate committee. Tidings himself sent a telegram asking why he was opposing the bill. In 1945, the senator resubmitted his independence bill, and Muñoz Marín flew to Washington to oppose it again. This time...
Really quick, for those who are joining us right now on TikTok, we are live on YouTube. The sound quality is a lot better. I have the microphone and stuff hooked up to the TV. And again, I really want to archive my stuff just in case any of you guys miss any of the content. So if you guys could do me a favor, switch over, show me some love, subscribe, comment, share. Let's shake up the algorithm on both apps. So if you're more of a TikToker, I get it. Stay on here. Show me some love here. I appreciate it. But if you don't mind, show me some love on YouTube too, guys. Look, you can watch it on your TV now. You can watch me on your TV now. How about that?
That if Congress approved...
Oh, my bad, YouTube. I'm reading my TikTok comments. Don't be hating.
The Puerto Ricans would physically perish within 5 years. He gave this doomsday testimony, despite the fact that 11 of 19 senators, 22 of 39 representatives, and 42 of 73 mayors favored the bill. All told, 57% of Puerto Rico's democratically elected representatives officially supported independence. The unofficial percentage was probably higher, since many elected officials were hesitant to contradict their governor and party president, Muñoz Marín.
Thank you for the subscription.
On May 16th, 1945, Tidings submitted yet another independence bill, the Tidings-Pinheiro bill, which Muñoz Marín also opposed. In 1946, Muñoz Marín abandoned the pretense of supporting any form of independence for Puerto Rico. In a 2-day conclave of his Popular Democratic Party on July 3rd and 4th, 1946, he announced that he was no longer an independentista. After a 10-hour debate, the conclave adopted Muñoz Marín's position and dropped independence from its platform. By 1948, Muñoz Marín's transformation into U.S. puppet was complete. He told reporters that the only serious defect in U.S.-Puerto Rico relations was the law preventing the island from refining its own sugar.
Right.
Also in 1948, he convened an emergency legislative session to pass Public Law 53, the gag law, which was almost identical to the U.S. Smith Act. As previously discussed, the law made it a felony to own or display a Puerto Rican flag, even in one's home, to speak in favor of Puerto Rican independence, to print, publish, sell, or exhibit any material that might undermine the insular government, and to organize any society, group, or assembly of people with a similar intent.
And this is one of the prime reasons why you see all the flags, especially across the diaspora, right? Because it's not just a direct result of what happened on the island, it's the continuation of the struggle as the migration happens as well, right? Because we got to understand the two concepts, right? But this is why you see, especially the entire diaspora, how we wear our flag on our sleeves, right? Where we have it wherever we go, license plates, t-shirts, hats. Look at me, I'm a walking logo myself 90% of the time. But the realization is because of the trauma of not being able to speak out on independence, not being able to rep and honor our flag. It is the constant suppression of the Puerto Rican people of what you have today, us so outspoken, us so out there wanting to show very proud, right? Because of the things we went through to fight to have those things and still be able to preserve those things, such as, you know, our flag, our language, our cultures, our gatherings. You know, these are the things that were suppressed. And we got to understand, when the United States arrived in 1898, the assimilation the United States did to the people to convert them into more of their way of thinking was crazy. We got to understand the psychological aspect. We can't just look at the physical force, because the physical force is one thing, right? Because that instills a certain kind of fear. But the psychological aspect makes you feel like you can't do anything. That's the difference. There's a difference between fear and not being able to see yourself accomplish anything because you've been taught to believe that you're nothing. There's a difference. But let's keep tapping that screen. Let's keep sharing this live. Again, guys, go look up the gag law. That's something very important that everyone should be able to go look up, especially the Boricuas, so you could definitely understand why we so proud, why we wear our flags everywhere, guys. I forgot for how many. I think it was like 15 years, or maybe I could be off on that number, but it was a long time that Puerto Ricans were not being able to fly or even speak of or any of these things. And we talk about other countries and other regimes, right, that do that, and what do we call them? Dictators. So what is the United States? A dictator. I'm just saying, it might not be equivalent to what you label a dictator, but once you change language, you change laws, you change policies, you force individuals to be able to assimilate, you do not allow them to speak up and speak out against the injustices within society, you become exactly what you preach against. A dictator.
Within 2 years, Muñoz Marín had used Law 53 to arrest over 3,000 people without evidence or due process, and to imprison some of them for 20 years. The island newspapers immediately protested against Law 53 as a threat to freedom of the press and of speech. They even convened a protest assembly on May 25th, 1948, sponsored by El Imparcial, El Mundo, El Dia, and the president of the press circle, and was attended by hundreds of journalists, lawyers, union members, and teachers. When newspapers started calling Luis a traitor, he responded, "This law is precisely to prevent anyone from gagging the Puerto Rican people through fascist threats of force. I have asked the FBI to enforce it." This was the same FBI that had records of Luis's own criminal narcotics activity.
So incarcerating individuals for about 10 years, or I forgot how much the fine was at that time, is preventing individuals from suppressing the Puerto Rican people. Does that make sense to anybody? Like, for me, I'm a little lost when that's being said right there, because you're literally, so you're going to do it to me so nobody else could do it to me. That makes it okay? Make it make sense.
The same FBI that had him, and through him the entire island, on a tight leash. 5 months after the passage of the gag law, Luis captured the brass ring, the greatest prize of his life. He became the first elected governor of Puerto Rico. With the complete dominance.
First elected governor of Puerto Rico under the United States, because I hate when even people do that. Because unfortunately, whether we want to accept it or not, that short reign of governance that Spain allowed Puerto Rico to obtain was way more sovereignty and independence than it's ever had in its conceptions after colonization. So we gotta really be careful when we talking about history and historical context to make sure we don't skip over certain things, because the United States does that. because it makes it seem like it's the one that set the foundation. We did this, we did that. And it's not just in this aspect. So many things. Even, you know what? Let's just get into the book. I'll get sidetracked.
The Democratic Party throughout the island, and his lock on the vote of rural Jibaros more focused on food and survival than the nuances of First Amendment law. There was no stopping the Muñoz Marín juggernaut. The inauguration at La Fortaleza, the governor's mansion in Old San Juan, was a glamorous international event covered by Life, the New York Times, CBS, and NBC. Time magazine put Muñoz Marín on its cover, rumpled hair and all. Guests included U.S. senators and congressmen, David Rockefeller, and Beardsley Rummel, president of Macy's. Thousands of Jibaros poured down from the mountains in trucks and buses. Thousands more walked for hours, bearing fruits and sundry gifts for their new governor. The inauguration even had its own postage stamp, with a decidedly Jibaro theme. For the first 2 years, Luis tinkered with the island bureaucracy and merged a few government agencies to control their spending. But the greatest changes occurred within his own mansion. Luis divorced Muna Lee and remarried his mistress, a schoolteacher named Inez Mendoza. She became the decorator-in-chief of La Fortaleza. Inez knew the value of first impressions, particularly on visiting U.S. dignitaries and business people. She purchased Queen Isabel II and King Alfonso XII antiques, coat of arms tapestries, European paintings and mirrors, Italian marble tables, gilded bronze chandeliers, porcelain lamps, engraved silverware, and a golden console for the throne room. It was a fine life, and Luis was proud of it. He had spun a high school GED, a bohemian youth, a famous father, and a drug habit into a governorship. President Harry S. Truman was a phone call away. WIPR radio broadcast his weekly show across the entire island. He owned a newspaper and a printing press. Vigüe News filmed all his speeches and delivered Muñoz Marín newsreels to every island movie theater. He was no longer a Greenwich Village poet. He was the lead actor, writer, and stage director of a drama unfolding around an entire people. Late at night, Luis wandered among the shadows of the great mansion. He walked through the throne room, queen's room, governor's room, blue room, mirror room, music room, tea room, and a dozen other rooms, then made himself a sandwich in the kitchen. He sat in the library where Puerto Rico's Carta de Autonomía, Charter of Autonomy, hung decoratively on a wall. He watched as U.S. Navy ships passed under the southern tower, and moonlight bathed the mahogany terrace. Saturday nights were the most precious of all. After a long week of haggling with the legislature, dancing with the press, and reading FBI reports on the Nationalist Party, a little opium enabled Luis to regain some of the poetry of his youth. He would lock the door to his third-floor study, which overlooked the immensity of San Juan Harbor. He'd read a few chapters of Harold Percival's Thinking and Destiny, and listen to Mozart's string quartets and Liszt's Anais de Pèlerinée. He would sit on a small, intricately carved mahogany bed with a low-hanging canopy of silk brocade, a womb-like space, enveloped by darkness and quiet. He would set out a bamboo tray with a small knife, 2 knitting needles, several scrapers, and a sugarcane pipe, all neatly arranged around a coconut oil lamp. He'd open a diplomatic pouch, cut off a chunk of black chandu, and divide it into 10 peanut-sized pellets. With the 2 knitting needles, he'd spin and knead the first pellet over the lamp's flame until it softened like taffy and turned brown, then tan, then burnished gold. Georgie E. called it cockroach wings. He'd shape the gold into a little pyramid, pack it into the pipe bowl, and pierce a hole in it with a knitting needle. Then he'd lie on his hip, tilt the pipe over the lamp, and inhale slowly. Soon a bone-deep relaxation would spread through his body. Inez warned that people were noticing the dark circles under his eyes and commenting about his drinking and drug habits. He countered that he was following the time-honored tradition of Samuel Coleridge, Ben Franklin, Charles Dickens, and Pablo Picasso. But the truth was probably more prosaic. No kiss had ever felt sweeter, suppler, or more enchanting than the mouthpiece of the opium pipe on Luis's lips. It provided the milk of paradise, and he would continue to drink. Jean Cocteau said, "It is difficult to live without opium after having known it, because it is difficult, after knowing opium, to take Earth seriously." But Earth became very serious for Luis on October 30th, 1950, when the revolution started, and 5 nationalists tried to murder him. Chapter 12. The Nationalist.
All right, guys, let's keep it going. This chapter is about an hour long. We're probably going to do this chapter and then probably end out the segment because we're trying to keep it down to about two hours or so, because I don't want to be do too much on YouTube, because to get you guys to listen to long, lengthy videos is very rough. So let's tap that screen on YouTube. Let's tap that screen, share this live. And if you guys can do me a favor, we're live on YouTube on the moment. If you guys can go check out the YouTube account. Again, all gifts and donations on both platforms will be going to the Young Lords Back to Borinquen project. We will be in Yabucoa, Puerto Rico from October 6th to the 15th. So if anybody wants to help donate on TikTok, the link is in the bio, the GoFundMe. But all gifts, donations, the Cash App is $, Cash App. $AfroTaino 88. Damn, I don't know where I was going with that one. But if you guys could do me a favor, go check out the YouTube channel, guys. We're live and direct right now, and the audio's a lot better on YouTube than it is on TikTok. I had the mic set up, and it's a different camera perspective. So if you guys could do me some favor, show me some love and support, and let's shake up the algorithm on both sides. Peace, blessing, positivity. We got about 54 minutes into this chapter. Let's get to it.
On July 28, 1898, General Nelson Appleton Miles, Commander-in-Chief of the American Army, marched into Ponce. At that time, Puerto Rico was a province of Spain that had just secured its autonomy. Now another foreign power was invading again, passing the...
Yeah, I heard that, right? Just making sure we heard that clearly.
From one owner to another. There was no battle. The Spanish garrisons knew the Americans had already won in Cuba and the Philippines, and they had no intention of dying for the last island in their shrunken empire. They rigidly adhered to General Manuel Casado's order. If there are many Americans, run. If there are a few, hide. If there are none, engage in battle. As Miles marched in and hoisted the American flag, a few reporters and local politicians clustered around him. Some townspeople listened to his speech, but most were uninterested. No one was more curious than a barefoot boy, 7 years old and brown as a chestnut. His mouth and eyes formed 3 awestruck O's. He had never seen so many guns, such tall men, and such a big flag. Nor had he ever heard the strange language flowing from General Miles's mouth, which sounded like a dog with indigestion. It was all so grand that when General Miles finished, the boy applauded and yelled, "Que viva Puerto Rico!" because he assumed it was the right thing to do. Everyone turned with a grave expression. The soldiers eyed the crowd. The boy kept smiling and yelled, "Que viva Puerto Rico!" again. His name was Pedro Albizu Campos. Albizu was born out of wedlock to a local mestizo named Juliana Campos. His father, Don Alejandro Albizu Romero, was a wealthy Basque merchant who refused to acknowledge his dark-skinned son. So Albizu ran barefoot through the barrio Tenerias of Ponce. Juliana spent most days wandering through the streets of Ponce, talking to herself, and oddly, burning garbage in their family hut. She took Albizu several times to the nearby Rio Bucana in order to drown them both, but family and friends interceded.
Tap that screen, guys. Tap that screen.
Calling her La Llorona, the weeping woman. One day, when Albizu was 4 years old, she tried to walk across the river and was carried out to sea.
Tap the screen, guys.
For a 4-year-old orphan, Albizu was remarkably carefree. He didn't attend school until age 12. His maternal aunt, Rosa Campos, adopted him, and for 8 years he swam, fished, and threw mud balls in the same river that had carried his mother away. He stole coconut pies from La Pandaria de Ponce and rigged the town bell to ring at 3 a.m. When he heard of a new sport called baseball, and that the Almendares Baseball Club had trounced the U.S. Infantry Regiment with a score of 32-18, Albizu learned everything he could about the game, cleared out a small field, and taught the local school kids to play. He made up half of the rules as he went along, but no one complained. This was his first lesson in leadership. It was a lively, adventurous childhood, not unlike that of Tom Sawyer living with his Aunt Polly on the banks of the Mississippi River. Just like Polly, Aunt Rosa was a devout woman, and they walked several miles to the Catholic Church every Sunday. She also made sure that even though Albizu's clothes were hand-me-downs and a size too small, they were always clean and pressed. Every morning, rising sleepily from his warm bed, Albizu found Aunt Rosa boiling eggs by the early morning light, his clothes hanging over a kitchen chair. Home from school, he found Rosa sewing and ironing, tending great brown pots on a little stove. She moved in clouds of steam like a humble god, disappearing and reappearing, smelling of warm cotton, sofrito sauce, and simmering rice and beans. When Albizu entered the Percy Grammar School at the age of 12, his classmates snickered at the overgrown first grader, but the tittering ended when he completed all 8 grades in 4.5 years. He graduated in 2 years from Ponce High School with a 96% average. He was the class valedictorian and captain of the debate team, and received a scholarship to the University of Vermont. In Vermont, Albizu lived at 43 Middle Converse Hall, and became known for always wearing a black fedora hat to ward off the cold, since Burlington was 45 miles from the Canadian border and averaged 81 inches of snow annually. In 1913, Pedro Albizu Campos became the first Puerto Rican to be admitted to Harvard College. Like the rest of America, Cambridge, Massachusetts was a rowdy beast in the early 1900s.
Facts.
Noisy automobiles and belching delivery trucks clogged the streets. Carpenters, masons, and steel riveters were everywhere as the campus exploded with a dozen construction projects. Harvard Stadium, the President's House, the Varsity Club, the Peabody Museum, the Germanic Museum, the Payne Music Building, the Gibbs Laboratory, Lars Anderson Bridge, Widener Library, 2 science buildings, 3 student dorms, and a 26-acre medical school. From the moment Albizu arrived at Harvard, the giant kept swelling all around him, sprouting arms and legs, growing new muscles, declaring its manifest destiny all over Boston. The heirs to this destiny were clearly marked. They lived in a 3-block strip on Mount Auburn Street called the Gold Coast. Apthorpe House, one of the finer mansions in Cambridge, was large enough for impromptu football games, indoor rifle practice, and a house monkey. Randolph Hall had a swimming pool, squash courts, an interior courtyard, and a private phone system. Claverley Hall had a heated pool, high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, ash trim, marble fireplaces, building-wide steam heat, and servants' quarters in most suites. The Gold Coast students came from established prep schools: Exeter, Andover, Groton, Deerfield, Taft, Choate, Hotchkiss, Milton Academy, St. Paul's, and banded together in exclusive final clubs. Most notably, the Porcellian and the A.D. They were a select group defined by family, social class, and money. Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt, J.P. Morgan, T.S. Eliot, Oliver Wendell Holmes, William Randolph Hearst, and Owen Wister all belonged to a Harvard Final Club. Albizu did not. He saw the Duesenbergs, Renaults, and Mercedes parked outside Claverley Hall, the liquor salesmen tromping through the Gold Coast, the students staggering out of their clubs, then throwing up on the cobblestone streets, and he wanted no part of it. He was thankful, though, for this intimate view of America's ruling class. Albizu enjoyed Thursday Vespers in Appleton Chapel and watching the sunset over the Charles River. He enjoyed seeing the black eyes, nosebleeds, and shredded clothes of Bloody Monday, the day when freshmen and sophomores beat each other silly for no apparent reason. He enjoyed the characters around campus. John the Orange Man, peddling fruits from a donkey-drawn cart. John Shea, who could locate any book in Widener Library and told students, "Don't be laxative in your work." Adolphus Terry, Harvard's human encyclopedia, who memorized the names, faces, and course records of every student in the college. Albizu especially liked Adolphus because he was black. In addition to his Harvard studies, Albizu taught Spanish classes at Walpole High School and tutored other Harvard students in chemistry, French, and Spanish. He wrote articles for the Christian Science Monitor and was voted president of the Cosmopolitan Club, which sponsored visits from foreign scholars and dignitaries. An exceptional student, he graduated with honors in 1916 and was admitted to Harvard Law School. Albizu became known around campus for his work ethic, good manners, and steadiness of character. His one impulsive act occurred when he met a Peruvian graduate student named Laura Meneses. He invited her to lunch at Union Hall. The next day they lunched again. The third day he asked her to marry him. She laughed in his face then, but eventually she agreed, and they remained partners for life. When the United States entered World War I, Albizu volunteered and served as a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army. He helped organize and train the 3rd Battalion Infantry of Puerto Rico, and was the only colored officer at Camp Las Casas, the Army training base on the island. Both in the Army and during a military tour through the American South, Albizu encountered widespread racism. He saw it on buses and trains, at lunch counters, and in restrooms, stores, post offices, and even churches. He heard it when soldiers joked behind his back, not realizing that he understood every word. By the time he returned to law school in 1919, Albizu had made a decision. No matter how many degrees he earned, or how many times the people at Harvard patted him on the head,
listen up,
he would never be one of them.
At all.
The United States would never take him, his people, or his homeland seriously. In fact, Americans couldn't even spell or pronounce his island's name. And so, to give meaning and purpose to his own life, Albizu devoted himself to the cause of Puerto Rican independence. He did this systematically. He studied the Magna Carta, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, the U.S. Constitution, the Congressional Record, the Teller Amendment of 1898, the Platt Amendment of 1901, the Cuban-American Treaty of 1903, the parliamentary rules of the Spanish Cortes Generales, the admiralty rulings of the 1897 International Maritime Committee, and the Puerto Rican Carta de Autonomía, Charter of Autonomy. He confirmed that the Treaty of Paris was essentially a real estate closing and a violation of international law with regard to Puerto Rico. He then reached out to other anti-colonial movements, meeting with Eamon de Valera, president of the Irish Republic, and Mahadev Desai, a leader of the Indian anti-imperialists. He canvassed the factories of Cambridge and the Irish wards of Boston for donations to the Irish Liberation Movement. One night, he walked into a packed Sanders Theater, where 1,400 students, faculty, and foreign diplomats were debating the Irish question. With references to the U.S. Constitution, the Federalist Papers, the British Home Rule Act of 1914, and Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal, Albizu spoke in favor of the revolution and electrified the audience. Lord Miller, on diplomatic leave from the British Parliament, interrupted the standing ovation to declare, "I am a British nobleman, so there is no need to inquire my opinion on the Irish question. But, gentlemen, I would not be a Britisher. I would not be a nobleman if I failed to admit that Mr. Campos has just delivered the most complete, the most brilliant speech on this matter that I have ever heard."
Tap that screen, y'all. Tap that screen.
In 1921, Albizu graduated from law school as class valedictorian and received multiple job offers. A clerkship with the U.S. Supreme Court, a diplomatic post at the U.S. Embassy to Mexico, a judgeship in Yauco, Puerto Rico, and an executive position with a U.S. corporation paying $15,000 per year.
Please don't forget, guys, go follow and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm really trying to build up the YouTube platform so that way I can move off of TikTok. TikTok for me is not as educational as it could be. It's a lot more bochinche, gossip, fighting, bickering, all this extra stuff. So to be able to preserve the good content that I'm trying to put out there without it being diluted, I would love to you guys to go follow me on YouTube. It's less provocateurs out there over there. So salute to everybody. Keep tapping the screen. And like I said, I'm live right now. So if you want to switch over and go follow me on YouTube, do me the solid. Let's get it.
Albizu refused them all and returned to his hometown of Ponce to pursue his growing obsession, the independence of Puerto Rico. Ponce's La Cantera section was one of the island's poorest districts, with cows in the village square, dusty brown streets, and hundreds of mud-floor shacks without plumbing or electricity. Alleys were piled high with mango pits, watermelon rinds, and chewed sugarcane stalks. A cloud of crane flies and mosquitoes descended on the garbage every morning, then migrated into the shacks. Albizu rented a wooden house on a dirt road. From a hill behind his house, he could see the Central Constancia sugarcane plantation. The vista showed an infinity of cane, thousands of rows, multiplied in successive mirrors, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. Laura joined him in 1922, and they married and had 3 children. Pedro, 1924, Rosa Emilia, 1925, and Laura, 1927. It was a difficult time. Albizu was practicing poverty law, and his clients were simple people, mostly sugarcane workers and jibaros, who paid with chickens, vegetables, and sometimes a simple thank you. Albizu's children had to share clothing and often wrapped their ankles in vinegar-soaked rags to discourage lice from climbing on board. Albizu had no savings or property, but he was building something more important, a reputation as a man of principle,
Facts.
a man who could be trusted. This reputation grew when he started writing for El Nacionalista de Ponce and advocating for independence around the island. It continued to grow after a political rally in 1925, when he removed every miniature American flag from the podium and stuffed them in his pocket. It grew from 1927 to 1930, when he traveled to Cuba, Panama, Mexico, Venezuela, Peru, the Dominican Republic, and Haiti,
Listen up.
campaigning and networking for his revolution. When he spoke about U.S. banks owning Puerto Ricans' land, the U.S. Navy controlling their borders, the U.S. Congress writing their laws, and U.S. companies paying them starvation wages in the sugarcane fields,
Really quick, and I'm addressing the comment on TikTok. If you feel a little bit lost, don't worry about it. We're live on YouTube, so that way you can go back and go follow up yesterday's part 1 and today's part 2, just in case you miss any context and you miss any part of the book and you want to be able to go back and follow along. Don't worry about it. We got you. Everything's being archived, so tap that screen, share this live, and I appreciate everybody on YouTube and TikTok. Salute.
everyone knew what he was talking about. He reminded his audiences, everywhere you look, you see a Yankee army, Yankee navy, Yankee police, and Yankee courts. And, according to the Yankees, owning one person makes you a scoundrel, but owning a nation makes you a colonial benefactor. In 1930, Albizu became president of the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico.
Listen.
Although the party did not have an island-wide electoral apparatus or any members in public office, it qualified for ballot status in the 1932 election cycle, with the required 28,000 inscribed members. The Nationalists were dedicated to one overwhelming cause: achieving independence for Puerto Rico as quickly and unconditionally as possible. This included the reclamation of all Puerto Rican lands, the nationalization of all banks, the reinstatement of Spanish as the primary language of public school instruction, and the elimination of tariff payments to the United States.
Listen up.
This platform of unconditional independence became more compelling as the Great Depression swept through Puerto Rico and hunger gripped the island. Also in 1930,
we gotta understand too, everything that happens in the United States, if it's doing bad here in the States, imagine how bad other U.S. territories are doing. If we rely on the United States to be able to keep us stable and to have stability, if the United States is in, say, like a crisis, economy crisis, or any kind of, do you not think it affects the territories that they've stolen as well, if they're reliant on the United States to be able to survive? Absolutely. Come on, guys.
Pedro used his legal skills to create a series of bonds registered on Wall Street. These bonds were an investment in the Republic of Puerto Rico, redeemable from the island's treasury on the day it became independent. The first bond offering was for $200,000 in increments of $10, $50, and $100. In 1931, Albizu defended a nationalist named Luis Velázquez, who had slapped the Chief Justice of the Puerto Rican Supreme Court during a political dispute and been charged with assault. The case went to the U.S. Court of Appeals, and when Albizu won, it became known as Velázquez's slap in the face. Throughout the early 1930s, Albizu continued to speak all over the island, and the crowds kept growing. In 1932, Albizu ran for the Puerto Rican Senate. He lost, and the Nationalist Party did not win a single seat.
Listen.
In fact, a poet named Luis Muñoz Marín sailed in from Greenwich Village and took the very seat that Albizu had worked for. Despite all the speeches, conferences, debates, campaigns, editorial columns, and lawsuits, the United States was not taking Albizu or his Nationalist Party very seriously. Everything changed with the sugarcane strike of 1934.
Listen.
From that moment on, the Americans wanted Albizu gone. As the Great Depression deepened, the U.S. banks that controlled Puerto Rico's sugar plantations cut wages all over the island. Sugarcane workers who had gotten 75 cents for a 12-hour day in 1929 were down to 45 cents in 1933. Starvation was rampant, and during the last 6 months of 1933, 85 strikes and protests erupted in the tobacco, needlework, and transportation industries. The bitterest conflict, however, was in the cane fields. On November 8th, 1933, the mill workers of Central Plazuela in Barceloneta went on strike before the start of the harvest and stayed out of work until December 5th. On December 6th, cane fires erupted in Central Coloso, and 1,200 workers went on strike. By December 7th, 8,000 more workers had joined the Coloso strike. On December 31st, the largest sugarcane plantation on the island, Central Guanica, went on strike. In early January 1934, the workers of Puerto Rico's entire sugar industry were striking, against not only their employers, but their own labor leaders. Without consulting the rank and file, the Federación Libre del Trabajo, the Free Federation of Workers, had signed an island-wide labor agreement whose terms did little for laborers and left their wages virtually unchanged. The Federation leaders, most of them comfortably ensconced in the Puerto Rican government, had sold out the workers. And so on January 11th, 1934, the sugarcane workers of Guayama reached out to a new leader. They asked Pedro Albizu Campos, as head of the Nationalist Party, to address an assembly of 6,000 people the next day.
Let's tap that screen, guys. Let's tap the screen and share
It
this
was a
live.
hot Friday night in the Plaza Pública Cristobal Colón. A breeze from the nearby Atlantic barely stirred the palm trees of the Guayama town square as a man wearing a black jacket, white shirt, and black bow tie stepped up to the Nationalist Party platform. His eyes were dark and piercing, his cheekbones sharp. He was not tall, standing about 5 feet 4 inches, but he spoke with an electric, almost religious fervor. A murmur ran through the crowd. El Maestro, the teacher, had arrived. And he was indeed a teacher, a great pianist of ideas, about to sit at his instrument and unleash a Wagnerian fury. He started slowly and built up a cadence. He cited history and religion, culture and tradition. It started to rain, but no one left the square. Albizu spoke to the people for 2 hours about their work, their land, and their island. He recited Puerto Rico, Puerto Pobre, a poem by Pablo Neruda. When he finished, the crowd of 6,000 applauded for over 5 minutes and asked him to lead the workers through the bitter sugarcane strike. The next business day, El Imparcial ran his entire speech on its front page. Albizu and the sugarcane workers formed the Asociación de Trabajadores de Puerto Rico, Workers' Association of Puerto Rico, and he negotiated on their behalf with the sugar corporations and the government. Albizu, a nationalist organizer, spoke personally in many towns, including Arecibo, Fajardo, Bayamón, Humacao, Rio Piedras, Yabucoa, and Salinas. Alarmed U.S. corporations formed the Citizens Committee of 1,000 for the Preservation of Peace and Order, and cabled President Franklin Roosevelt in a panic about anarchy throughout the island. A few days after the speech, during a meeting with Guanica cane workers, Albizu received a phone call. It was Colonel E. Francis Riggs, the police chief of Puerto Rico, inviting Albizu Campos to lunch at the El Escambron Beach Club. Albizu agreed to meet, then quickly hung up. He had already heard about Riggs, the heir to the Riggs National Bank fortune. The Riggs National Bank headquarters at 1503 to 1505 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest was right across the street from the Treasury Department and a few hundred feet from the White House.
Listen up.
The bank loaned the U.S. government $16 million in 1847 for a war against Mexico and $7.2 million in 1868 for the purchase of Alaska. 14 U.S. presidents or their families had banked at Riggs, including Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant. As the largest bank in Washington, D.C., with branches throughout the United States, England, Germany, and the Bahamas, Riggs specialized in private international banking for wealthy clients and embassy banking for 95% of the foreign ministries and embassies located in Washington. Throughout Central America, the Riggs National Bank was suspected of laundering money for right-wing dictators, bribing entire legislatures, destabilizing populist regimes, and financing military coups disguised as revolutions on behalf of the United Fruit Company. Now, in 1934, within weeks of an island-wide labor strike, the president of this bank had sent a special envoy, his own son, as the chief of police of Puerto Rico. This friendly neighborhood cop, with millions of dollars and thousands of armed men at his disposal.
Really quick, just to answer the question, on YouTube, it's the same name that's here on my TikTok, AfroTaino88. You can find it on YouTube. We're live right now as we speak. And again, everything that's being done on YouTube will be archived, so you guys can always go back and listen to it later on. Tap that screen, share this live. Appreciate you. What's up, sis? How's everything going? Peace, love, light, positivity to everybody on YouTube and TikTok. Salute to you guys. And again, excuse me, because I'm eating right now. The audio quality is a lot better on YouTube than it is on TikTok because I have the microphone and everything connected to YouTube. So go check me out, AfroTaino88 on YouTube right now, guys. Go subscribe.
Just invited Albizu for a sit-down. El Escambron Beach Club was Puerto Rico's most spectacular private resort. The restaurant sat on the water's edge with breathtaking views of El Morro, Fort San Cristobal, and the San Juan beachfront. A horseshoe-shaped boardwalk extended out over the water, right into the ocean, to create the largest outdoor pool in the world. On January 18th, 1934, as he walked into El Escambron, Albizu noticed many U.S. Navy officers, several local businessmen, 2 members of the Puerto Rican Senate, and Fay Ray, the Canadian-American actress most famous for playing the female lead in 1933's King Kong. Riggs sat at a corner table in military regalia, a white tunic with gold buttons, large epaulets, and a splash of medals on his chest.
We have 28 minutes left of the chapter, guys. Really quick, if you missed yesterday's episode, we did about 3 hours, 2 hours and 40 something minutes of the book yesterday. So we did maybe about 8 chapters yesterday. So you can go find that on YouTube right now. It's actually uploaded last night. But if you guys missed yesterday's, you can catch up. It's up there in the archives, guys. So keep tapping the screen, keep sharing this live, and I appreciate all the love and support. I told y'all my initial goal is to actually being able to transfer the book club all the way strictly to YouTube. So that's why I'm trying to get you guys to be able to go over there, subscribe, because I do want to transition with the book club off of TikTok. So let's get it, guys.
He shook Albizu's hand heartily. In a flurry of busboys, waiters, and sommeliers, they ate a splendid lunch and discussed the Golden Gate Bridge, the Spanish Civil War, Noel Coward's design for living, and Joe DiMaggio's hitting streak. Everything but the sugar strike. Their waiter spoke English and listened attentively. Finally, Riggs came to the point. He asked Albizu what he thought of Luis Muñoz Marín, to whom the nationalist had recently lost the Senate election. Then he offered to donate $150,000 to the Nationalist Party to ensure that Albizu won the Senate seat that year, or in 1936.
Listen up.
And to make Albizu governor of Puerto Rico within 10 years' time. Millard Tidings, a good friend who owed Riggs a few favors, was about to chair the U.S. Senate Committee on Territories and Insular Affairs. Tidings could sponsor a bill allowing Puerto Rico to elect her own governor, and Riggs could ensure that Albizu got the job. In exchange, Albizu would back down and let Riggs take care of the strike.
Listen.
If Albizu refused the deal, Riggs would take the offer to Muñoz Marín. Albizu rose slowly, thanked Riggs for lunch, and told him Puerto Rico was not for sale.
No se
At
vende.
least not by him.
Nope.
Albizu knew a great deal about Riggs, but he didn't.
Really quick, I seen a short, I guess it was maybe in a film festival, but they did a short footage. I forgot what university, but the students reenacted. You know, they had somebody play Pedro Campos, and they had somebody play the other man, and you can see the whole interaction of him offering Pedro Campos all of these things, and he turns around and tells him like, "Nah, Puerto Rico no se vende. You know, we don't sell." But go check that out. I think if you type in Pedro Campos here on YouTube, it'll pop up and you guys can see. It's maybe like a 5-6 minute like short docuseries. Like not docuseries, little small snippet. It looked like it was presented in a film festival. So that's why I'm telling you guys, go check it out. It's pretty dope. I think what I did, if you check my TikTok, I think I screen recorded a portion of it, and it's somewhere in my archives on TikTok. But let's keep tapping that screen, keep sharing this live. We got 27 minutes and 11 seconds left of the chapter, guys, so let's keep it going.
The new chief had worked in the military intelligence department.
And real quick, salute to everybody watching me on YouTube. Peace, blessings, positivity to you guys. I really appreciate everybody that's watching me right now on YouTube. I can't only give love to TikTok, but salute to everybody. Let's keep it going.
Washington, D.C. Nor did he know that Riggs had just come from Nicaragua, where he'd been advising a budding dictator named Anastasio Somoza, who, 1 month later, on February 21st, 1934, would assassinate Augusto Sandino. He also didn't know that Riggs would triple the size of the insular police force and arm its officers with grenade launchers, machine guns, carbines, and 12-gauge shotguns. In addition, He would recruit over 100 FBI agents to follow Albizu all over the island and infiltrate the Nationalist Party.
Listen up.
On February 23, 1934, 2 days after the assassination of Augusto Sandino, the sugar strike was settled. The workers would receive $1.50 for a 12-hour day, more than double the amount they'd gotten before. The island newspapers all reported Albizu's great triumph. As word of it spread through Washington and Wall Street, another word came back down. The Nationalist Party must be stopped by any means necessary. And
I'm not gonna lie, it's very similar language that they was using against like the Black Panthers, the Brown Berets, the Young Lords, AIM, SDS, all of these organizations. It's similar language that they're using against these groups.
the violence began. After receiving several death threats, Albizu moved his family to a less exposed house in Aguas Buenas and posted a 24-hour guard, which intercepted several FBI assaults and 3 firebombing attempts in 1934 and 1935. Albizu also created the Cadets of the Republic, the official youth branch of the Nationalist Party. By 1936, over 10,000 cadets were marching and training in 21 towns. Their commander-in-chief was Raimundo Diaz Pacheco. Vidal Santiago, Albizu's personal barber, was one of the captains. Police Chief Riggs was not impressed. On October 24, 1935, an army of policemen raided a student rally, shooting and killing 1 cadet and 3 members of the Nationalist Party in what became known as the Rio Piedras Massacre. The massacre was barely mentioned in the American press. Police Chief Riggs told La Democracia that if Albizu continued agitating for independence, there would be war to the death against all Puerto Ricans. 3 months later, on February 23, 1936, Police Chief Riggs was assassinated on his way to El Escambron. The 2 nationalists who shot him, Hiram Rosado and Elias Beauchamp, were arrested, beaten for an hour, then executed in a San Juan police station. Governor Blanton Winship moved quickly, prohibiting all public demonstrations throughout the island and ordering an investigation. The insular police raided several dozen offices and homes, seized documents and recordings of Albizu's speeches, and 11 days later arrested Albizu and 8 other nationalists. Lacking any evidence of murder or indictment to murder, the prosecution charged Albizu with conspiracy to overthrow the U.S. government. The first jury of 7 Puerto Ricans and 5 Americans failed to reach a verdict. Just before the retrial, at a cocktail party in the governor's mansion, U.S. Attorney Cecil Snyder showed a list of hand-picked jurors to a well-known artist named Rockwell Kent. According to Kent, the people on Snyder's list were precisely the ones later impaneled during voir dire, who then sat in judgment on Albizu. Kent went public with this information, but it had no effect on the case. He spoke directly to the press, stating, Albizu Campos was denied the right to a fair and impartial trial by jury. He even submitted a letter to Senator Henry F. Ashurst, chairman of the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee, but no inquiry was ever made. At the retrial, the clerk of the court declared 14 potential jurors unavailable or excused for cause, removed 5 others, and controlled the entire voir dire selection process. When the smoke cleared, the new jury consisted of 10 Americans and 2 Puerto Ricans. On the first day of the trial, July 27, 1936, every room, hallway, elevator, and staircase in the Jose Toledo Federal Building was jammed with U.S. soldiers. The surrounding streets were all blockaded. FBI agents mingled with the crowd. National Guardsmen roamed the halls. In the courtroom itself, over half the spectators were police and plainclothes detectives. On July 31, 1936, the Insular Police arrived with Thompson machine guns, rifles, and tear gas, and cleared out the entire building. U.S. military commanders from Camp Santiago and the new chief of police, Colonel Enrique de Orbeta, sat in the courtroom as the jury delivered its verdict. 10 years imprisonment for Albizu, 6 years for the other nationalists. Elmer M. Ellsworth, a special assistant to Governor Winship, was a member of this hand-picked jury. In a fit of remorse, he sent a letter to President Roosevelt stating, "The jury was motivated by strong, if not violent, prejudice against the nationalists, and was prepared to convict them regardless of the evidence. 10 of the jurors were American residents in Puerto Rico, and even the 2 Puerto Ricans were closely associated with American business interests. It was evident from the composition of that jury that the nationalists did not and could not get a fair trial." The letter was ineffectual. Albizu was jailed in La Princesa prison in San Juan. A Palm Sunday march in support of Albizu resulted in the Ponce Massacre. Finally, after an unsuccessful appeal, Albizu was flown to the U.S. Penitentiary in Atlanta on June 7, 1937.
Listen.
Although the Atlanta Penitentiary was a large facility with 300 acres and 2,500 inmates, Albizu received special and constant attention. All his mail was opened. He could only correspond with an approved list of people, mostly a few family members, and could not send or receive any packages, nor could he receive any magazines or newspapers. He was allowed only 1 visit per month, and many people, such as Nobel Prize-winning poet Gabriela Mistral, were simply turned away. His health deteriorated. Reports of anemia and extremely low hemoglobin received no attention until Congressman Vito Marcantonio threatened the warden. Marcantonio represented East Harlem, which at that time contained the largest Puerto Rican population on the U.S. mainland. Despite all this, Albizu managed to write magazine articles on behalf of Puerto Rican independence and published them in Mexico, Magazine Excelsior, and Argentina, Claridad, under the witty pseudonym Pedro Gringoire, Pedro Algo Gringo. He also translated letters for other prisoners and worked in the prison library. One day in the library, he encountered an unusual book, published by General Smedley Butler in 1935. War is a Racket. Butler had been a Marine for 33 years and was the most decorated Marine in U.S. history. He had received 16 medals, 5 for heroism, and was one of only 19 men to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor twice. He retired as a Major General, and for a brief period was the highest-ranking commander in the U.S. Marine Corps. One section of the book reads, "War is just a racket. Only a small inside group knows what it is about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the masses. I wouldn't go to war again, as I have done, to protect some lousy investment of the bankers.
Listen.
There isn't a trick in the racketeering bag that the military gang is blind to. It has its finger men to point out enemies, its muscle men to destroy enemies, its brain men to plan war preparations, and a big boss, super-nationalistic capitalism. I spent 33 years in active military service as a member of the Marine Corps. I served in all commissioned ranks from second lieutenant to major general. And during that period, I spent most of my time being a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street, and for the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico, especially Tampico, safe for American oil interests in 1914.
Listen.
I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues.
Listen.
I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street.
Listen.
I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers in 1909 to 1912.
Listen.
I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interests in 1960.
Listen.
In China, I helped it to see that Standard Oil went its way unmolested.
Listen.
Looking back on it, I feel that I could have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 continents.
Yo.
Then Butler provides 11 pages of facts and figures, showing the profit margins of hundreds of U.S. corporations during World War I. Butler's father had been a U.S. congressman for 31 years and had chaired the House Naval Affairs Committee. By studying U.S. Senate appropriation documents, Butler found that 49 steel plants, 340 coal producers, 122 meat packers, 153 cotton suppliers, and 299 garment makers had profited enormously from World War I. The war had cost $52 billion, and $16 billion of it, 30%, had been pure profit for the war suppliers. War is a racket confirmed everything Albizu had seen in Puerto Rico. When he tried to do something about it by leading labor strikes and advocating for independence, the United States had rigged a jury and thrown him in jail. Around this time, on June 3, 1943, Albizu was released on probation in New York City. He had been in prison for over 7 years. Within 3 days, on June 6, 1943, Albizu was admitted into Columbus Hospital with a diagnosis of arteriosclerosis, coronary sclerosis, brachial neuritis, and anemia. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover didn't believe the diagnosis and sent a memo to the U.S. State Department. Albizu Campos is reported to be using his private room in the Columbus Hospital as the headquarters of the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico in New York City. He receives many notable visitors and holds meetings in this room. Campos continues to be hospitalized on his own volition in order to elicit sympathy and appear as a martyr.
We got 15 minutes left of this book, everyone. 15 minutes. So let's tap the screen on YouTube and TikTok. Let's end this chapter out with a bang. Let's tap it up, tap it up, tap it up, tap it up.
Hoover bugged the hospital room and listened in until a nun discovered a microphone in a wall lamp. That same day, Congressman Vito Marcantonio rushed down from East Harlem. He yanked the wiring out of the walls, cursed Hoover through the microphone, and threatened to produce the wire on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives. Albizu stayed in Columbus Hospital until November 9, 1945, and lived in the Bronx until December 11, 1947. On that day, he went to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, boarded the SS Catherine, and returned to Puerto Rico. From the moment Albizu set foot in San Juan, Hoover became obsessed with following and recording his every movement, essentially becoming his Boswell. In a memo to U.S. Secretary of the Interior, Julius Krug, he wrote, Pedro Albizu Campos, the president of the Nationalist Party, arrived in San Juan, Puerto Rico, December 15, 1947, from New York. He was greeted upon arrival by the leaders of the Nationalist, Communist, and Independence parties of Puerto Rico. A crowd of several thousand met him at the dock, the crowd including an honor guard of 40 black-shirted cadets of the Liberating Army, under the command of Colonel Raimundo Diaz Pacheco. Later, at a mass rally of the Nationalists, Communists, and Independentistas, Albizu condemned 1. United States Navy expropriation of Vieques, Puerto Rico, and warned of further expropriation by the United States. 2. Teaching of English in Puerto Rican public schools. 3. Application of the Selective Service Act to Puerto Rico, and claimed that now is the hour of decision and action, not words. The anti-communist hysteria aside, Hoover's description is accurate. Thousands of Puerto Ricans and dozens of FBI agents met Albizu at the dock. They packed into San Juan Cathedral and followed him in a heaving mass to Sixto Escobar Stadium, where he would address a standing room-only crowd of 14,000. The Puerto Rican flags flew everywhere, from cars, storefronts, houses, trees, and even the stadium rafters, and WPRP broadcast Albizu's speech island-wide. The FBI agents added a curious glamour as they openly filmed and taped the event and noted the identity and license plate of every nationalist leader in attendance. A youth choir sang La Borinqueña, and then Albizu began his speech. My name is Pedro Albizu Campos. You are my people, and this is our island. A roar filled the stadium. For over an hour he thundered about independence. The stadium shook as the crowd members stomped and chanted and cheered and pumped their fists in the air. El Maestro was back. Every newspaper on the island reported Albizu's dramatic return. After a brief stay in the Hotel Normandy, he gathered his family and settled into a second-floor apartment in Old San Juan, on the corner of Calle Sol and Cruz. The stream of visitors seemed endless, and on the first floor below them, the Bar Borinqueña became a hotspot for journalists and university students. For the first few weeks, Albizu felt the joy of family he hadn't seen in 10 years, and the warmth of many holidays. Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, Three Kings Day, the 8 days of Octavitas. But soon he noticed some changes across the island. The newspapers weren't clamoring for independence anymore. No labor movement had developed. Nationalist Party funds were scarce. Enrollment in the cadets of the Republic had dropped by 80% to less than 1,000. And the U.S. military was everywhere. The Navy had occupied Vieques and was using it for artillery practice, exploding 5 million pounds of ordnance per year. Camp Santiago occupied 12,789 acres in the town of Salinas. Ramey Air Force Base covered 3,796 acres in Agua.
Really quick, I just caught myself. I'm watching. I looked over to see, because I'm also controlling the chat. So I'm looking at the YouTube and I see my leg shaking. So if you guys see my leg shaking on YouTube, it's because listening to this shit gives me anxiety sometimes, which I'm pretty sure it gives a lot of you guys. But this shit gives me a lot of anxiety to understand not just the physical aspect, but the psychological warfare that they've have done to our people. Not just my people, not just Boricuas, but people all over the place. Like, it's crazy. So if you see my legs shaking back and forth or rocking back and forth like this, perdóname. It's my anxiety, guys. It's my anxiety.
Fort Buchanan had 4,500 acres in metropolitan San Juan, with its own pier facilities, ammunition storage areas, and massive railroad network into San Juan Bay. Every July 4th, the U.S. flexed its muscles with a military brass band.
10 minutes left of the chapter, guys. 10 minutes left of the chapter. Don't forget, guys, we got people watching on YouTube now. We are going dual live every day from TikTok to YouTube. We're trying to transition over to YouTube. So please don't forget, go shoot me a subscribe or a follow or whatever the lingo is over there. So that way you can be able to go backtrack the archives. Because if you miss something, you'll be able to go back on YouTube. That's the whole reason I'm jumping over to YouTube. But let's keep it going. 10 minutes left.
Infantry battalions, a tank company, a bomb.
The YouTube is the same exact here on TikTok, AfroTaino 88. The same picture, same everything. You're going to find everything exactly on TikTok is on YouTube.
Squadron. 3 aerial fighter squadrons. The 504th Field Artillery Battalion. The 18th Mechanized Cavalry Squadron.
Thank you.
And 4,000 soldiers. The entire 65th Infantry Regiment. Marching down Calle Fortaleza, just 3 blocks from Albizu's house, to remind everyone who was boss. And then there was Roosevelt Roads, the largest naval station in the world. Spread out over Vieques Island and the Puerto Rican mainland, it encompassed 32,000 acres, 3 harbors, 9 piers, 1,340 buildings, 110 miles of road, 42 miles of oceanfront, and an 11,000-foot runway. It housed 17,000 people and serviced up to 1,000 ships annually. The island's politics were also beginning to change. Luis Muñoz Marín controlled the Puerto Rican Senate and had shifted the dialogue from independence to economic development with a program known as Operation Bootstrap. In 1947.
And this, for me, is where a lot of the disconnect comes with the diaspora and the islanders. And I don't push division. It's just having a better understanding, right? Understanding the impact and what Operation Bootstrap did to the island by decreasing the population on the island is tremendous. But we also got to understand that Operation Bootstrap displaced a lot of us with faulty promises, right? Telling us that we're going to be able to bring in generational wealth, to be able to bring it back to the island, and to be able to create better economy. And what happened is we came into the slums of the states, right? Giving very minimum resources, very minimum help. Again, if you look at the conditions in New York City, because that's where a lot of Boricuas were migrating at the time. Because if I'm not mistaken, a lot of us also had to come in through Ellis Island, which, if you know, is Ellis Island. It was for migrants migrating into the United States. Even though Puerto Ricans were citizens, we still had to get working papers at the time, whether people didn't know that or not. But understanding the conditions, in Brooklyn and Lower East Side, Spanish Harlem, working their way to the South Bronx, and then all over other places, you got to understand the harsh circumstances and conditions, not just Boricuas, but African Americans and anyone who migrated to the city at this time was going through. Like, it's very detrimental. So not just the poverty that you move into and you assimilate into, right? But it's also the systematic oppression, because this is something that's not spoke about on the island a lot, because it's a different world out there, when it comes to that. Their politics are controlled by the U.S. government, but the way systemic issues is yes, it's oppressive to the people, but not to the level of what the United States is, in my perspective. I could be 100% wrong, and I don't take away from nobody's experience. Again, this is not a trauma competition. I don't do that. What I'm telling you is understanding stop and frisk, understanding school to prison pipeline, understanding all of these things that literally black and brown, people have to go through being raised here in the United States. It's bad enough that our parents have enough time finding jobs and being able to assimilate, especially if they're coming from another country into this country. Different language, different everything. So even when Boricuas on the island want to constantly tell Boricuas, oh, but y'all don't even speak Spanish. Well, that's a product of assimilation, dude. That's a product of our family and our parents trying to assimilate into culture to survive. And unfortunately, as much as people want to take it as an excuse, didn't have the time to be able to teach Spanish to us. The welfare program, they speak English. All social services program, English. The work environment, English. School, English. ESL, English. This is what I'm telling you. So to even have the opportunity to be able to teach your kids a language while you're also trying to learn a language, whether people want to accept it as an excuse or not, it is the harsh realities of a lot of the conditions that we go through. And this is why I say our struggle is the struggle of the island. We're a continuation of what happens when we leave the island due to this, force of decreasing the population in Puerto Rico. No matter which era you're talking about, it directly impacts both groups of people, because they are the same people. They are a continuation of the struggle. And this is what we both sides have a hard time understanding, because we have that thing within us where everything is a competition. Oh, no, but you don't understand this. Oh, no, but you don't understand this. No, how about we take all the information we've gathered, all the history, all the trauma, and we put it together and actually make the book. Because if we're trying to write two different books, this is why we keep being at odds with one another. And that doesn't just go for Boricuas. I'm just directing it towards Boricuas because I'm Puerto Rican. It's easier for me to, address it on that. But that goes for the Mexican culture, to check out however you describe it to be. You got the northern issues, the southern issues. You have that with Jamaicans, with all different kinds of people, because these are the issues that we all go through psychologically while assimilating into the United States or any other colonial power that enters your life or enters your country, right? Because however you want to put it. But let's keep going, guys. We got 8 minutes and 42 seconds left on the clock. Don't forget, guys, go subscribe on YouTube. We are live right now, and the audio quality is a lot better on YouTube than it is on TikTok right now. So peace, blessing, positivity. Let's get this 8 minutes over with, guys.
Puerto Rico passed its first tax exemption law to excuse all new businesses from insular and local taxes. That same year, the government legalized gambling, constructed an enormous textile mill, and contracted with Conrad Hilton to build a super luxury hotel, the Caribe Hilton. But most importantly, on May 2nd, 1947, the U.S. Congress authorized Puerto Ricans to choose their own governor, with the first election slated for 1948. In the editorial pages and on radio shows, in the barber shops and beauty parlors, in living rooms and dining rooms, and at domino tables, the talk had shifted from, will Puerto Rico become independent, to, who will be the first governor?
And what's crazy is that they made us citizens at this point. We'd already fought in a whole bunch of wars. We already contributed in so many different ways, right? And we still haven't had the proper conversation.
Had become marginalized. He had been rendered irrelevant. To make his nationalist dream come true, Albizu would have to do something dramatic, theatrical, and desperate. Something that would reach beyond the borders of Puerto Rico and explode onto the world stage. The FBI knew this, and so kept his house at 156 Calle Sol under siege, stationing a police car outside day and night, and photographing and interrogating every person who entered the building. If Albizu stepped onto the street, the news was transmitted to the central radio station of the Insular Police. If he or his family members went for a walk, police agents followed them. They also broke the traffic lights around the house, which gave them a legal excuse to detain any motorists in the vicinity, and to question, ticket, harass, or arrest them. His mail was intercepted, and he had to sell his car because it was constantly stopped and searched on the streets and highways. The transcripts of all this surveillance, of Albizu, the Nationalist Party, and other subversive individuals, eventually totaled nearly 2 million pages. On March 29, 1948, J. Edgar Hoover placed the Nationalist Party on the FBI list of organizations working to subvert the U.S. government. This entitled him to more funds, more electronic surveillance equipment, and more agents in Puerto Rico. A few months later, the leash tightened further. On June 10, 1948, Luis Muñoz Marín engineered the passage of Public Law 53, the gag law. This law was nearly a word-for-word translation of Section 2 of the anti-communist U.S. Smith Act, and it authorized the police and FBI to stop anyone on the street and to invade any Puerto Rican home. If the police found a Puerto Rican flag, the residents could all be arrested and jailed. On October 19, 1949, on the floor of U.S. Congress, Representative Vito Marcantonio gave the following report on Albizu Campos.
That's why I laugh at people when they be like, yeah, Puerto Ricans have their flag everywhere and da-da-da. Why they always doing that? Oh, my God. It's because it's a lot of political reasoning behind it. Even for Boricuas that don't even know this history. That's how deep it is, right? The pride is because of the suppression. So whether even a lot of our people know about the gag law, any of these things, their parents has embedded this prideness in them, you know, in Puerto Rico, in the culture, in the flag, because of the things that happened in the past. So yeah, a lot of what goes on within our culture, maybe some of the historical context is not provided to us for us to not be able to be aware when we do see it, but we do have some type of awareness of pride when it comes to being Boricua, being Puerto Riqueño, you know, coming from Puerto Rico. Like, is a specific pride, and a lot of it comes to the suppression of the people and the nationalist movements.
Today he lives in San Juan under the type of police surveillance and intimidation that could only have been duplicated in Hitler Germany. When the leader of the Nationalist Party leaves San Juan to attend a meeting or to make a speech, his car is trailed through the countryside by an armed column of police cars and jeeps. Every hotel or home in which he stays is immediately surrounded by a cordon of police. Every meeting of the Nationalist Party takes place behind police lines. Campos is an American citizen, yet he and his party are harassed and intimidated at every turn. Business had tripled at the Salon Boricua over the past 2 years. The little barber shop had become a hothouse of gossip, arguments, and unlicensed liquor. The loudest arguments occurred when a tipsy barber nicked a customer during a shave. Ever since the passage of the gag law, Albizu went there every 2 weeks and received a hero's welcome. When he entered, he'd be asked, "How's it going, viejo?" "The same as always," he would reply. "I've got 40 FBI agents on my tail." Everyone would laugh, and Albizu would sit down for his haircut, trade jokes with shop owner Vidal Santiago, take a shot of rum, talk with the customers, and buy a lottery ticket or two. When he paid for his haircut, he would pass a handwritten note to Vidal along with the dollar. Sometimes he'd leave another dollar under the statue of Santa Barbara. Then he would go to the bathroom, where he had a 5-minute window of opportunity. Albizu would remove a false panel, climb over some plaster, and crawl into the next-door apartment at 353 Calle Colton. He would talk for 3 minutes to Raimundo Diaz Pacheco, Blanca Canales, and other top lieutenants of the Nationalist Party.
Salute to them, salute to them. If you don't know who Blanca Canales is, please go look her up. The most iconic picture of her is her and her little, I guess, bata and a big-ass shotgun. Facts.
He would scramble back into the Salon Boricua's bathroom and flush the toilet. "Did an agent wipe your ass?" Vidal would ask. "He tried to," Albizu would say, and everyone would laugh uproariously. This crude exchange was actually a signal that the meeting had occurred, and everything had been discussed. For nearly 2 years, until the Revolution of October 1950, the Salon Boricua was a lifeline for Albizu, providing the only secure way for him to communicate with his Nationalist Party leaders. On October 7th, 1950, he heard that Faustino Diaz Pacheco and Vidal Santiago had joined Los Desaparecidos, the ones who have disappeared. Faustino was the brother of Raimundo Diaz Pacheco, Albizu's commander-in-chief. With Vidal gone, Albizu could no longer visit Salon Boricua and slip into the apartment next door. In fact, the disappearance of these two could mean the entire party had been infiltrated. The walls were closing in on Albizu, and he decided to go for a walk. 2 FBI men followed as he strolled past the Cine Luna Theater with its Sands of Iwo Jima posters, circled around Fort San Cristobal, and walked along the ocean's edge. To his left was La Perla, the poorest district in San Juan, a tin-roof shantytown just a few hundred feet from the governor's mansion. He walked past the battlements of El Morro, with its ancient Ordóñez cannons, which had failed to hold off the American invasion in 1898.
Facts.
Out in the bay, a battleship cruised toward Fort Buchanan and then Vieques. He followed the shoreline till he reached El Escambron, with its tennis courts, cabana boys, white-gloved waiters, and the restaurant, where Police Chief Riggs had offered him $150,000. Albizu sat on an embankment and looked across the harbor. The Caribe Hilton, Hotel Normandy, Condado Lagoon, and a dozen other luxury hotels dotted the shoreline. Thousands of tourists splashed in the water and basked in the sun. Coca-Cola signs sprouted up from nearly every street. His island was becoming difficult to recognize. The landscape of his childhood was being erased, bit by bit. And now, after working and studying so hard, he had gone to prison and lost his law license. He had no real livelihood. His phone was tapped. His family was being followed. FBI agents analyzed his garbage, and most of his friends were in jail or had disappeared. Meanwhile, Luis Muñoz Marín had cut a deal with the United States and was sitting in the governor's mansion smoking opium. Albizu sighed and shook his head. Perhaps he was fighting for an island long gone and simply needed to wake up. Others had given up and were now building tourist traps all over the island. A cheer erupted from the FBI men some 50 feet away. They were huddled over their shortwave radio, listening to Game 4 of the World Series. Albizu looked over and they waved at him. "The Yankees won," they said. Albizu smiled and waved back.
Oh, can we get it? There we go. I was trying to hit the round of applause and it wasn't working. That's the end of that chapter right there, guys. We got about 4 hours and 35 minutes left of the entire book. We've been up here for over 2.5 hours. So I'm about to end the live out. I really appreciate everybody tapping in with me this morning into the afternoon. Again, don't forget, go check me out on YouTube. We're still live on YouTube. It's AfroTaino88. Same picture, same way you write it out here. Again, that way you can go back and go watch whatever you missed, right? The archives will be uploaded every couple of hours after I do the live, because it takes a moment to process from YouTube. It's YouTube's thing. They doing their own thing. But once I finish the live, it goes through its process, and by, I want to say, like 8, 9 o'clock tonight, the videos should be fully uploaded. This is the first time that I did the full setup on my computer, so I got everything going, everything set up here. It's a different camera view on YouTube. Hold on, let me show you guys really quick. Boom, on TikTok. So if you see the camera views a little bit different, I don't know, I may or may not keep it that way. Let me go rewatch some of it later on tonight. But again, guys, I'm trying to transition the book club over to YouTube so that way we can archive it. I might, go time to time, on TikTok, but as of right now, I'm gonna go dual live so that way I can have people, transfer over to YouTube to be able to find my content. But when I got a nice following, I'm not gonna be going live on TikTok no more, at least with the book club. For me, I just prefer to be able to do it on one platform where I can be able to archive and really document some of these lives that I am doing. So, but I really appreciate all the love and support. Again, AfroTaino88 on YouTube. You can go find me. Don't forget the Young Lords Back to Puerto Rican project. We are going to Yabucoa, Puerto Rico, October 6th to the 15th at the Marco Sanchez Community Center to be able to help them out with their efforts. The Marco Sanchez Community Center was a school that lost funds and resources, so they shut it down. So the community has taken it over to reallocate it for hurricane emergency relief and also community participation and community growth. So without further ado, guys, I'm about to shut it down on YouTube. So if TikTok want to hold on 1 second, let me go shut down my live on YouTube, and maybe we get into some music or something like that, or something. But to everybody on YouTube, peace, blessing, positivity. I really appreciate all the love and support, and I will see you guys tomorrow with War Against All Puerto Ricans Part 3. Hopefully I can get up a little bit earlier, and let's see, maybe we crack out the whole 4.5 hours tomorrow, but I'm not sure. So peace, blessing, positivity. I'm gonna go end the live on YouTube. Give me a second, guys.